Chapter 531. Such a mobilization meeting also took place in the other 4 villages of the 5 major villages. At this moment, the Kage of the shinobi village exerted his charm as the leader to the extreme. Almost all the ninjas in the 5 major villages were infected by such an atmosphere. Now, they're not fighting for their own interests, they're fighting for the future of the shinobi world. This kind of mood made everyone excited. However, there was a place that didn't have such a lively atmosphere. On the contrary, it was rather cold and gloomy. Konan was sitting in her room, staring at the window of her room with a slightly empty look in her eyes. Outside the window, it was raining. The rain country was such a country that even the gods couldn't help but weep. After Nagato's death, Konan received the news from Jiraiya. As a person who has experienced a lot of things, Konan naturally knew that Nagato's death was definitely not done by the people inside the wood leaf. After all, as long as Nagato was alive, it was a kind of suppression on her, and the people inside the wood leaf weren't so short-sighted. Konan also slowly set her eyes on the masked hoodlum, who had been looking very restless all this time. He called himself Uchiha Madara. He declared war on the entire shinobi world, and announced the Eye of the Moon project that was completely different from the previous plan. Now, Hoodlum has completely put himself in the position of the leader of the Akatsuki, and what made Konan even more surprised was that this transition of power was unusually smooth, with almost no waves. It seems that Hoodlum has already taken control of the Akatsuki in his own hands. Poor Konan and Nagato thought that the Akatsuki was still the original Akatsuki, but they didn't expect that Hoodlum had already unknowingly turned the Akatsuki into a sword in his hand. Moreover, to be able to sneak into the wood leaf and quietly take Nagato's life, in Konan's knowledge, only Hoodlum, who is proficient in space ninjutsu, and who can perfectly integrate himself into the environment, can do this. After learning the news of Nagato's death, Konan has been hiding in her room and didn't want to go out, and Hoodlum's actions didn't make Konan care so much. For Konan, the shinobi world and peace didn't matter that much. What Konan cared about was Yahiko and Nagato, her 2 companions who had gone through hardships with her. Now that the 2 most important people to her have left the world, Konan couldn't help but be confused. Until now. His eyes, which were originally a little numb, were now burning with a ball of fire. It was a fire that burned with hatred and sadness as fuel. The target of this flame was Hoodlum, the one who took Nagato's life in Konan's heart. On the other hand, Hoodlum and Ju were in a room. They seemed to be discussing something. "How is it, did you get it?" Hoodlum said slowly as he looked at extinction in front of him. Facing Hoodlum's question, Zu didn't display her talkative nature. Instead, she fished out a small bottle from her pocket. The bottle wasn't big, but it was hard to take one's eyes off what was inside. Because in such an ordinary bottle, there was a legendary eye that belonged to the Rikudo-san Nin, the Rinnegan. Zetsu went to the wood leaf, and Hoodlum went to the 5 Kage tournament. This was the plan that the 2 had discussed before. Since Watergate was going to participate in the 5 Kage tournament, then the Rinnegan, which would make anyone jealous after seeing it, would definitely not be on his body. Therefore, there was a high probability that Watergate would put the Rinnegan in a safe place. Therefore, after Hoodlum and Zetsu discussed, they decided that one person would go to the wood leaf to get the Rinnegan, and the other person would go to the 5 Kage tournament to deter the 5 Kages. In comparison, Zetsu was more suitable for such an infiltration mission, and Hoodlum also hoped that he could take Sasuke to the 5 Kage tournament and force Sasuke to use his Manjikyu Sharingan beyond his limits, so that Sasuke could have Manjikyu Sharingan as the sharpest sword in his hand. When Sasuke was controlled by Danzo and was under the influence of Koto Amatsukami, Hoodlum had been watching, but because of the threat of Nangongja and Watergate, Hoodlum didn't dare to show his figure. Although Hoodlum was disappointed that there was no way to sharpen Sasuke into the sharpest sword in his hand, Sasuke was just a chess piece that Hoodlum arranged for a moment, so it didn't make Hoodlum feel that regretful. Hoodlum looked at the bottle in Zetsu's hand with only 1 Rinnegan in it. He looked at Zetsu and asked, "Why is there only 1 Rinnegan, where is the other Rinnegan?" Just like the Sharingan, only a pair of Rinnegan is the real sage's eyes with the power of the 6 paths and Nin. Why did Zetsu take out only one Rinnegan? Watergate is very vigilant, he didn't put the 2 eyes in the same place, I only found 1 eye. Zetsu looked at Hoodlum and said coldly. Obviously, Zetsu should be completely dominated by Black Zetsu at this moment. Hoodlum looked at Zetsu, and Zetsu looked at Hoodlum. The two didn't speak for a long time, as if there were thousands of thoughts in their hearts. But suddenly, the two of them stopped looking at each other. Zetsu glanced at the door of the room, then slowly walked to the wall and directly merged his body into the wall and disappeared. Hoodlum put the Rinnegan that Zetsu just handed to him in his arms. After adjusting his mood, Hoodlum looked at the door of the room he was in with a little indifference. Paper release, God's origami jutsu. Conan's cold voice sounded outside the room, and the door of the room was constantly making cutting sounds. In a moment, the steel door was directly cut into pieces. Conan, what do you mean by this? Hoodlum asked as he looked at Little Nan, who was controlling paper. Little Nan's body had turned into paper and was ready for battle. After hearing Hoodlum's question, Conan didn't explain much, but directly controlled paper to attack Hoodlum. She didn't come here to seek an answer. She came here just to send the person who may have taken Nagato's life to Yellow Spring. It's that simple. Chapter 532. Looking at Conan who was silently attacking him, Hoodlum's expression became more and more unsightly. In all fairness, Hoodlum didn't want to have a falling out with Conan, after all, most of the core members of Akatsuki had fallen. Now the core members of Akatsuki were only Ju, Conan, Kisame and Hoodlum himself. Conan herself, no matter if it was fighting ability or support ability, she was very outstanding. If possible, Conan could also help Hoodlum to complete his plan. However, looking at the current Xiao Nan, she was completely ignoring him. Her only thought was to kill him. Even if Hoodlum had a glib tongue, there was no room for him to use it, right? A trace of impatience flashed in Hoodlum's eyes as he watched Paper, who was under Conan's control, continuously attacking him. His hands were constantly forming hand seals, the chakra in his body flowed in a special way, and a ninjutsu was completed. Fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu. There were many fire release ninjutsu widely spread in the ninja world, but only one fire release ninjutsu was frequently used by the Uchiha clan, and even slowly crowned as the signature fire release ninjutsu of the Uchiha clan. And this fire release ninjutsu was the Great Fireball Jutsu used by Hoodlum at this moment. Looking at Hoodlum's skillful use of the Great Fireball Jutsu, Conan's eyes flashed with a trace of dignity. Although her paper release ninjutsu had undergone a lot of modifications and had a certain degree of fire and water resistance, but looking at the power of Hoodlum's fire release ninjutsu, her paper release ninjutsu was still very easy to ignite. Paper release, Infinite Paper Shuriken Jutsu. Conan's hands quickly formed hand seals, and a ninjutsu that was frequently used by Conan was directly released. In general battle, Infinite Paper Shuriken Jutsu was used to contain the enemy, and didn't have any particularly outstanding attack ability. But this time, the paper shuriken created by Infinite Paper Shuriken Jutsu floated in the air under Conan's control and quickly rotated. As the paper shuriken spun faster and faster, gusts of wind surrounded the paper shuriken. Seeing that the wind pressure had accumulated, Conan immediately controlled the paper shuriken to shoot towards Hoodlum. The huge burning fireball was surrounded by wind pressure, and under the continuous attack of the paper shuriken, it was soon fragmented into pieces. However, the paper shurikens didn't stop attacking. They continued to attack Hoodlum. Looking at the small space around him, Hoodlum knew that he couldn't display his full strength in such a place, so he directly used his space ninjutsu to escape into the void. "You want to fight me? Then come out." After saying that, Hoodlum completely disappeared. "Go outside?" "That's exactly what I wanted." Looking at the place where Hoodlum had disappeared, Conan's eyes flashed with an indescribable light. How could he come here unprepared to fight someone who is proficient in space ninjutsu? The advantages and disadvantages of hoodlum space ninjutsu have been engraved in Conan's heart. Before coming here, Conan was fully prepared. After opening the door, a pair of paper wings appeared on Conan's back. With a flap of the wings, Conan's figure floated in the air. At this moment, Hoodlum was standing at the top of a building in Amigakure. After discovering that Conan saw him, Hoodlum's figure disappeared again and then appeared in the next place. Obviously, Hoodlum was leading the way for Conan. When Conan saw Hoodlum deliberately moving towards the direction outside the village, her heart was slightly relaxed. After all, the current Amigakure can be said to be developed by her and Nagato together. If Conan destroyed the crystallization of her and Nagato's creation because of fighting, although Conan wouldn't be soft-hearted, she would still be slightly sad. Conan waved her white wings behind her and flew in the direction that Obito was leading her. Soon, Conan had already caught up with Hoodlum, who was deliberately slowing down. The two still didn't exchange any words and directly fought. The snow-white paper and the orange flame collided in the sky. Sometimes the flame swallowed the white paper and turned it into a pile of ashes, and sometimes the white paper extinguished the flame and turned it into a wisp of smoke. The battle between the two looked particularly fierce, but when Hoodlum wasn't paying attention, small scrolls secretly fell from Conan's body. After these scrolls touched the ground, they immediately merged into the ground and disappeared. At this moment, Hoodlum was too tired to deal with Conan's paper-release ninjutsu, so he didn't seem to notice this small detail. "Tell me, did you kill Nagato?" Conan looked at Hoodlum standing opposite her and finally said the first sentence since the battle. Sure enough, it was because of Nagato? Facing Conan's question, Hoodlum was silent at this moment. Because Hoodlum felt that no matter what answer he gave, it wouldn't change Conan's mind to kill him. In that case, why should he explain to Conan? It would be a waste of his momentum, and it would be useless. Since the battle had already begun, there was naturally no reason to end it casually. Looking at Hoodlum, who was silent, but constantly launching ninjutsu in his hand, Conan slowly shook her head. Although she didn't answer, Conan didn't need Hoodlum's answer. "Hoodlum, or Uchiha Madara. I don't care who you are, but you deceived me and Nagato, that is an indisputable fact. So, I will kill you here." Conan's hand made a hand seal, which Hoodlum was very familiar with, because most of the seal scrolls were made after making such a hand seal, and then infusing chakra into it to unlock the seal. At this moment, after Conan made the hand seal, the chakra in her body constantly poured into the ground. Obviously, Hoodlum could perceive that there were many things underground that didn't exist in the ground. Die. Paper release, God's Origami Jutsu. The God's Origami Jutsu is a ninjutsu that can manipulate paper at will. Usually, Conan often manipulates white paper that has been processed to a certain extent, but in the ninja world, there is an extremely common paper ninjutsu, that is, explosive tag. Chapter 533. Hoodlum would usually use two methods to evade attacks. The first was to transfer his body into an alternate dimension, causing all attacks to miss. The second was to turn his body into a void, allowing all attacks to pass through his body. Conan has worked with Hoodlum for a long time. Although Hoodlum usually deliberately hides his ability, Conan still found his weakness through her own observation and information collected from various channels. Transferring his body into a different space, as long as Hoodlum can successfully do this, he will be in an almost invulnerable state. Although this ninjutsu is almost invulnerable, it has a fatal flaw. Hoodlum actually needs time to completely absorb his body into a different space. This time is just a blink of an eye for ordinary people, but it is a huge disadvantage for powerful ninjas. As for the second ability, the ability to turn one's body into a half-materialized, half-ethereal state didn't exist for a period of time. However, there was a strict time limit to turning one's body into an ethereal state. Conan does not know how long the specific time limit is, but according to Hoodlum's past records, this technique can only last for about 4 or 5 minutes. To counter Hoodlum's weakness, Conan has finally prepared a method that is highly likely to capture Hoodlum and even kill him. Under Xiao Nan's control, explosive talismans, which had runes engraved on them, shot out from the ground. Normally, only a few explosive talismans would be used in a normal battle, but now, they were like an endless sea. One of the 7 swords of Kirigakure, the explosive sword, Flying Foam, was only added with an explosive tag on the back of the sword. During the battle, the explosion of the explosive tag could be controlled, and it became a famous sword in the ninja world. Now, there are more than hundreds of explosive tags in front of him. At this moment, the endless explosive talismans were like surging waves that carried tremendous power as they came crashing towards him. A sense of crisis quietly crept into Hoodlum's heart. He must leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, once he is involved in the explosion of these explosive tags, he will likely die. It was this sense of danger that prompted Hoodlum to activate his spatial ability. Circles of spatial ripples formed around Hoodlum's body. Seeing Hoodlum start to use his space transfer ninjutsu, Conan immediately transferred a large amount of chakra from her body to her legs. Under the stimulation of chakra, Conan's speed soared in a short time. With Xiao Nan's improved physique, she was able to use body blink easily. She stood in front of Hoodlum, who was using space teleportation, and an explosive talisman flew into her hands. Trying to escape? In your dreams. Xiao Nan stuck the explosive talisman on Hoodlum's mask while he was casting spatial transference. Hoodlum hesitated. A part of his body had entered the alternate dimension while another part of his body remained in the real world. This situation made Hoodlum's body slightly sluggish, and he was unable to nimbly dodge Xiao Nan's explosive charm. The instant the explosive talisman came into contact with Hoodlum's mask, it exploded. Xiao Nan's body instantly turned into pieces of white paper and disappeared. Paper clone jutsu? Hoodlum almost instantly recognized the method Xiao Nan used to dodge the explosion, but at this moment, he didn't have the mind to care about Xiao Nan. The explosive talisman itself was very powerful. If hit at close range, it would be the same as being hit by a C-grade or B-grade fire release ninjutsu. Although Hoodlum's mask was made of special materials, the upper half was still blown to pieces. Due to the powerful impact of the explosive talisman's explosion, a part of Hoodlum's body that had entered the alternate dimension was directly dragged out. Xiao Nan didn't give Hoodlum the slightest chance to react. She directly detonated the endless sea of explosive talismans. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, a large number of explosive talismans had started to explode one after another. The powerful shockwave of the explosion and the power generated from the explosion almost made the drizzling rain of the country of rain disappear without a trace. Looking at Hoodlum, who was completely caught in the explosion range, Xiao Nan's eyes were slightly emotional. Is everything finally coming to an end? After killing Hoodlum, whether it's the Akatsuki or the dream of bringing peace to the ninja world, it will be submerged in the long river of history. Since Hoodlum has declared war on the 5 major countries, the 5 major countries won't easily let go of the Rain Country and Akatsuki. I only hope that the 5 major countries can change in this war, and don't hurt the innocent lives. 600 billion explosive talismans, this was the last resort of the Akatsuki after Conan spent almost all of their savings. These explosive talismans were originally used by Nagato as a last resort to perish together with a strong enemy, but now they were used by her to deal with Hoodlum. As time passed, the explosion became more and more violent, but no matter how many explosive talismans there were, they would eventually run out. With the disappearance of the last explosion, the powerful explosion that shook the earth finally came to an end. Looking at the scorched earth that had sunk nearly 2 inches due to the explosion, Xiao Nan's eyes were full of complex emotions, and she didn't speak for a long time. Even if it was Hoodlum, in such an explosion, wouldn't even have his bones left? Conan slowly untied the black Akatsuki's uniform with red clouds on it, then casually threw her uniform on the charred ground. Akatsuki was still not her home. Along with the Akatsuki's uniform slowly falling down, Conan nevertheless felt a kind of ice-cold sensation suddenly coming from her abdomen, and a kind of blazing sensation was emitted from the place where the ice-cold sensation came from. Am I being attacked? Lowering her head, Xiao Nan looked at her abdomen, and saw the tip of a kunai directly extending from her abdomen. It's really dangerous, being able to force me to this point, you should be proud. Xiao Nan, accompany Yahiko and Nagato to sleep in the Yellow Spring. But don't worry, in the world of the Eye of the Moon, you can still be happy, carefree, and enjoy the peace you dream of. Chapter 534. Conan tried her best to turn her head so that she could barely see Hoodlum, who was standing behind her and piercing her abdomen with kunai. Hoodlum was wearing a mask that only revealed his right eye. At this moment, the upper half of the mask was shattered by the explosive tag that Conan pasted on the mask. Although Conan still couldn't see Hoodlum's face because of the lower half of the mask and the bandage wrapped around his forehead, it was enough for Conan to see Hoodlum's eyes at this moment. In Hoodlum's right eye was still the familiar three-tomo Sharingan that Conan was very familiar with. In Hoodlum's other eye that had been hidden under the mask, a completely white eyeball appeared in it. Conan had never seen such an eyeball before, but if Sasuke appeared here, he would immediately understand what happened just now. A completely white eye without any color. This was the appearance of the Sharingan after using Izanagi. Indeed, Hoodlum's illusory time was actually limited, which was 5 minutes. The 600 billion explosive tag that Conan used before exploded for more than 10 minutes. Generally speaking, Hoodlum couldn't be unscathed in it. However, Hoodlum hid a three-tomo Sharingan in his left eye. When he realized that he couldn't protect himself through conventional means, Hoodlum also made a prompt decision to use Izanagi to reverse reality while he was still able to make himself semi-illusory. Turning all unfavorable factors into favorable factors, such an effect seemed a bit illusory and unspecific, but Hoodlum still used this ability to strengthen his semi-illusory state, allowing him to survive this earth-shaking explosion. Although Hoodlum was unscathed, he didn't immediately attack Conan. Instead, after finding that Conan had relaxed, Hoodlum suddenly appeared from the void where he was hiding and directly stabbed Conan's abdomen. Looking at Hoodlum's face that was less than 1/3 exposed, Conan's eyes widened, and her mouth opened and closed. She seemed to want to say something, but she couldn't say a word for a long time. Hoodlum glanced at Conan and didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled out the kunai that he had stabbed deep into Conan's abdomen. Originally, due to the existence of kunai, the wound did not bleed profusely, but at this moment, after coming into contact with the air, the blood could not stop flowing out. A large amount of crimson liquid gushed out from Xiao Nan's abdomen. Drops of crimson blood splattered on the charred ground. Black and red were known as the most matching colors in this world. At this moment, Xiao Nan, who had long purple hair, was lying weakly on the ground. This scene unexpectedly had an indescribable beauty. But at this moment, no one could see such a beautiful scene. Although Xiao Nan's consciousness was a little hazy, her body was still very clear. In fact, her senses were even sharper than before. The smell of soil and blood rushed into Xiao Nan's nose. This smell was very similar to the smell of the country of rain during the war when Xiao Nan was still young. In a trance, Xiao Nan seemed to see two figures standing in front of her. She tried hard to identify the two tall and familiar figures in front of her, but when she focused her eyes, she found that the two tall figures had turned into two rather childish children. One of the children had orange hair, while the other had red hair that covered most of her face. Both of them stretched out their little hands towards Xiao Nan and said together, "Brother Xiao Nan, I'm sorry, Brother Xiao Nan. Come on Xiao Nan, we've been waiting for you for a long time." Xiao Nan raised her hand, only to find that her hand was no longer as big as she was familiar with. Instead, it had become small and tender. "I'm coming." Nagato and Yahiko. Xiao Nan's voice also turned into the soft voice she had when she was a child. It was no longer as cold as ice. Hearing Xiao Nan's response, Nagato and Yahiko had dazzling smiles on their faces. At this moment, Nagato no longer had the look of deep hatred, and Yahiko no longer had the feeling of carrying the whole world on his back. Xiao Nan also didn't have the stiff feeling of forcibly closing her heart. Everyone was no longer as mature as they were after experiencing hardships. Everyone had finally returned to the difficult but exceptionally satisfying and happy days from before. After eliminating Xiao Nan, Hoodlum walked step by step into the Rain Village. After passing through many checkpoints and hidden doors, Hoodlum walked to the most secretive place in the Rain Village. Deep underground, except for the people that Hoodlum could trust, no one knew that there was such a building under the Rain Village. The ghetto mazo that was used to seal the tailed beasts was now in this space. Ju, who was half black and half white and wrapped in a huge pitcher plant, was now standing in front of the ghetto mazo. Oh? Is everything done? Zetsu was an excellent perceptive ninja, and when Hoodlum walked in, he didn't deliberately hide his figure. Therefore, although Zetsu didn't look at Hoodlum with his eyes, he was very sensitive to Hoodlum's presence. Zetsu turned around and saw Hoodlum's somewhat embarrassed appearance. After all, Hoodlum's mask was directly smashed in half, and the Sharingan in his left eye was also pale white. It seems that Xiao Nan still caused some damage to you. Zetsu's voice had a bit of sarcasm, and such a tone made Hoodlum extremely uncomfortable. With a bit of impatience, Hoodlum said to Zetsu, "It doesn't matter, go prepare for the eye transplant surgery. Now that Nagato is dead, there is a flaw in our plan. Transplant the Rinnegan into my eye, and then we'll think of another way to resurrect Uchiha Madara." Hoodlum was the one who called himself Uchiha Madara in the 5 Kages tournament, and he seemed to be very familiar with Uchiha Madara. However, at this moment, he spoke in a completely different tone. Chapter 535. Hearing Hoodlum's sudden proposal that was completely different from the previous plan, Zetsu's eyes suddenly became sharp. For Zetsu, although Hoodlum is still somewhat useful, Uchiha Madara is more important. Hoodlum. No, there are no outsiders here, I'll just call you by your real name. Uchiha Obito, you should know who I am. White Zetsu is a clone cultivated from Senja Takuma's cells, and I'm a consciousness born from Madara-sama's Rinnegan. For me, nothing is more important than the perfect resurrection of Madara-sama. Now you're telling me that we should give up on the perfect resurrection of Madara-sama with Geto? As Black Zetsu spoke, the white egg-shaped objects hanging from the Geto golem's body began to move. They looked like flower buds or fruits. Like flowers blooming, the white egg-shaped objects opened one by one. White Zetsu that looked similar to White Zetsu appeared. White Zetsu's eyes were blank. Although these mass-produced White Zetsu weren't that strong, each of them was close to the strength of an elite Chunin. Although in front of Hoodlum or Uchiha Obito, these White Zetsu who only had the strength of an elite Chunin weren't that difficult to deal with, Obito had to explain in order to avoid unnecessary trouble. Black Zetsu, Nagato is dead now. The only person who is qualified to use the Rinnegan is me, who has the blood of the Uchiha clan and Senja Takuma's Mokutan cells, but now is the time of war with the shinobi world. Not to mention that I only have one Rinnegan, even if I have two, I can't use Geto to resurrect Uchiha Madara. This is not because I cherish my life, but because such a battle needs me, and it has to be me. Do you understand? Obito slowly took off the half-broken mask on his face, revealing his real face. It was a face that was very different from ordinary people. After all, during the Third Shinobi World War, Obito was ambushed at Kanabi Bridge, and the right half of his body was smashed into meat paste by the Rock Shinobi. If it wasn't for the fact that he was seriously injured at the place where the old Uchiha Madara was hiding, Obito would have died there as Kakashi thought. You've thought it through, you still have the talisman in your heart. Don't throw your life away because of a moment of unwisdom. Would Uchiha Madara trust a descendant who was related to him by blood? Of course not. Uchiha Madara is someone who doesn't even care about his own family as long as he can make himself stronger. Madara has no credibility at all for the mere connection between the two of them. What Madara needs is not a good enough descendant, but a tool that can faithfully carry out his plan. Therefore, in the heart of Uchiha Obito, Madara transplanted a talisman that can control Obito's life and death. The method of controlling the talisman was also taught by Uchiha Madara to Black Zetsu, who was derived from his consciousness. At this moment, Black Zetsu was using this talisman to threaten Obito, and Obito's eyes flashed with displeasure. However, Obito knew that his life was indeed in the hands of others. Over the years, Obito hoped more than once that he could erase the talisman in his heart, but how could Uchiha Madara leave such an easy way to break it? After trying all the methods he could, Obito knew that he was indeed suppressed by Black Zetsu and Uchiha Madara. No one would let their life be in the hands of others first, and Uchiha Obito was the same, so subconsciously, Uchiha Obito's heart floated to the Rinnegan in his arms. He hoped that this was not part of the plan, and it could bring some surprises to him. There was no way to remove the talisman by conventional means, so what about the eyes of the sage? I have a plan in my heart, transplant the Rinnegan first. Hearing Obito's words, Black Zetsu finally fell into silence, and waved his hand, and all the white Zetsu who were standing on the ground merged into the soil. Come with me. Seeing that Obito had made up his mind, and from the current situation, it was the most reasonable choice to hand over the Rinnegan to Uchiha Obito. So at this moment, although Black Zetsu was not so satisfied with Obito's arrangement, he could only do this, right? The operation went smoothly, but in just a few hours, such an eye transplant operation has been successfully completed. Benefiting from the effect of Senju Takuma cells in his body, Obito recovered very quickly. Although the Rinnegan could not be opened immediately, the power of the Rinnegan could already be used by Obito. Slowly opening his hand, Obito's chakra and the power of 6 paths contained in the Rinnegan directly mixed together and gathered in Obito's palm. Before Uchiha Madara died, he taught Obito all the powerful forces he had mastered, such as yin-yang release, 6 paths technique, and so on, but he was limited by his lack of Rinnegan. So although Obito was familiar with many methods, there was no way to use them. Now that Obito finally has the Rinnegan, naturally, he wanted to experiment a little to see how far he could use yin-yang release and 6 paths technique with only one Rinnegan. Yin-yang release is not a release technique, but a combination of 2 release techniques. Yin-yang release represents the power of the mind, and yin-yang release can create an invisible form. Yin-yang release represents the power of the body, and yin-yang release can inject life into the form. At this moment, Obito was using yin-yang release to carry out the most basic creation of a lifeless existence. A white mask in the shape of a 3-tomo Rinnegan appeared in Obito's hand. Now his identity can't be exposed. After his mask was broken by Konan, Obito decided to make a mask for himself that can withstand a certain amount of attacks. It's also a good opportunity to test what kind of performance his Rinnegan can have. Chapter 536. Black Zetsu stood aside with a gloomy face, watching Obito experimenting with the power of his Rinnegan. His eyes flashed from time to time, making people unable to see the depth of his eyes. Did he really only find the Rinnegan? Of course not. With Black Zetsu's ability, even if Watergate really put the Rinnegan in different places, Black Zetsu can still find it. So in fact, Black Zetsu got a complete pair of Rinnegan, but out of precaution against Obito, Black Zetsu only gave one of them to Obito. And regarding the Rinnegan, although Watergate paid a certain amount of attention to it, it was just a little bit of attention. After Watergate returned to the Woodleaf village, he actually saw the report of the loss of the Rinnegan, but Watergate didn't show any other negative emotions. Because Watergate knew that such an extremely valuable thing for the Akatsuki was taken away by him, and the Akatsuki wouldn't let it go. And Watergate naturally couldn't use the powerful ninjas of the Woodleaf village to guard the Rinnegan, because in Watergate's understanding, in a real war, the ability of a person to play is limited. When Nagato suddenly attacked the Woodleaf village, it was also because of the sudden incident that the Woodleaf village didn't react in time. Otherwise, how could they have the opportunity to release the Super Shinra Tensei, which takes a long time to gather power? So Watergate only used the highest level of protection under normal circumstances to guard the Rinnegan. It would be good if he could protect it, but if he couldn't, it wouldn't have much impact. Obito didn't have time to observe Black Zetsu's reaction. He just put on the high-strength mask he just made through Een release on his head. Taking off the Akatsuki's uniform that had become slightly broken, Obito took out a large blue-gray robe from his Kamui dimension, and the signature weapon of the Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Fan. Since everything is ready, let's go see an old friend who is very useful to us, right? With an unfathomable smile, Obito said to Black Zetsu standing beside him. Very useful? Hearing Obito's description, Black Zetsu finally got a little interested. After all, in the original plan, the main combat power of the Akatsuki against the ninja world was the clones of the White Zetsu that just appeared. Although the number of clones is large enough, according to the current situation of the 5 villages united, the Akatsuki is still in a disadvantageous position in terms of high-end combat power. Black Zetsu's mind was agile enough, so he naturally quickly understood what to say to Obito's to say. Pharmacist's pocket? Black Zetsu didn't know why he had some impression of this person who could only follow behind Orochimaru as a follower. Hearing Black Zetsu calling his name, Kabuto's mouth made a slightly hoarse voice, which sounded somewhat similar to the voice of the dead Orochimaru. At this moment, Kabuto's appearance and aura were very similar to Orochimaru's. Even Black Zetsu and Obito felt a little uncomfortable. I didn't expect that the Akatsuki's mysterious Zetsu, Sama would remember the name of a nobody like me. It's really scary. Obviously, it was a very ordinary self-modesty, but at this moment, it made people feel particularly uncomfortable when it came out of Kabuto's mouth. It even gave people a feeling of, you should have remembered me. But fortunately, Black Zetsu and Obito were both thoughtful people, and they didn't show their inner discomfort, but it was obvious that Black Zetsu was looking at Obito. It was as if he was telling Obito, if you don't show me the value of this guy, I can't guarantee that I won't kill this disgusting guy in the next moment. Obito and Black Zetsu have been together for so long, naturally, he knew that Black Zetsu was a bit of a profit-oriented person, so he said to Kabuto, it seems that our Zetsu, Sama doesn't recognize your qualifications to participate in this operation. Kabuto, show us your ability. After hearing Obito's words, Kabuto looked at Black Zetsu with a smile on his face, then stretched out his hand from his wide robe. The pale white hand with a little snake scale pattern began to slowly print in front of Kabuto's chest, and the chakra in Kabuto's body began to surge, and a ninjutsu was slowly being completed. Black Zetsu looked at Kabuto's hands and quickly recognized what this ninjutsu was. Created by the second Hokage Senju Tobarama, perfected in the hands of Woodleaf Snake Lord Orochimaru, and called by Sandaime Hokage as playing with the souls of the dead Edo Tensei. So that's how it is, the so-called help is the Edo Tensei? Through the Edo Tensei, the strong who have passed away are summoned, and these strong people are used to fill the gap in high-end combat power of the Akatsuki. How long has the history of the ninja world been, and how many legendary figures have been born in this long history? By summoning these ninjas who have been drowned in the long river of ninja world, the Akatsuki will definitely not lose to the coalition forces of the 5 great ninja villages in terms of high-end combat power. However, the Edo Tensei also has a fatal drawback, that is, the reincarnated people will not be able to exert their original strength so easily. If the spiritual control of the reincarnated powerhouses is released, then they will never accept the orders of others so easily. And if the spiritual control of the reincarnated powerhouses is forced, then the reincarnated powerhouses will become less flexible puppets. Such a problem can't be solved even by Orochimaru, otherwise, when the first Hokage and second Hokage invaded Woodleaf, they wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Could Medicine Master's pocket bring him some surprises? Chapter 537. Black Zetsu and Obito's eyes were firmly staring at Kabuto, and Kabuto also knew that this was a key test for him to participate in Akatsuki's plan. Although it seemed that there was no change, but Kabuto's heart was still stretched taut. Finally, the Edo Tensei was completed, and several coffins emerged from the soil one after another. Counting the number of coffins, there were 6 coffins at this moment. Controlling the coffin that he had summoned, he opened the seals on the coffin one by one. Finally, the expert hidden in the coffin revealed himself. "This is..." A slightly puzzled voice sounded, and a person wearing a dark red hooded robe walked out of the coffin. He stepped on the cold and damp ground with his slightly pale bare feet, as if he was sizing up the world around him. Soon, the figures of Black Zetsu, Kabuto, and Obito were projected in this man's eyes. "You've even summoned him out? Aren't you afraid that he will get out of your control and cause trouble for us?" Obito looked at the man who came out of the coffin, and a hint of vigilance flashed in his eyes. Because this man, like him, had Rinnegan formed by ripples in his eyes. This man was the former leader of the Akatsuki, Nagato. Uchiha Madara. Zetsu. A trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. Nagato stretched out his slightly slender palm, and chakra quickly condensed in it, and a group of seemingly small but particularly eye-catching black brilliance was born in Nagato's palm. Shinra Tensei. Before he could finish the name of the technique, the powerful repulsion in Nagato's palm disappeared in an instant. Looking at the Yakushi Kabuto who summoned Nagato, at this moment, his chest was covered with a hand seal that didn't belong to a conventional ninjutsu. It seems that such a hand seal suppressed the Shinra Tensei that Nagato was about to release. "You! What the hell?" Nagato naturally recognized Kabuto as the one who pulled him back from the underworld. Just as he wanted to say something to Kabuto, Kabuto directly used chakra in his body to force Nagato to close his mouth. "Noisy! Now is not the time for you to speak." Nagato, who was once a god, who had the eyes of the sage, who was the commander of the Akatsuki, was now being scolded by Kabuto. Such a scene was absolutely impossible when Nagato was alive, but at this moment, all of this was happening. After scolding Nagato, a happy smile appeared on Kabuto's face. In fact, Kabuto was also a pitiful person. He was pulled to the root by Danzo at a young age and trained as a spy. Being a spy for a long time has caused Kabuto's mind to become sick. Later, because of the death of Kabuto, who was also a root ninja, Kabuto's mind collapsed. Kabuto be the root, but it was only the symptoms. It didn't solve the root cause. After he followed Orochimaru's the root. After Orochimaru was killed by Sasuke, in Kabuto's mind, he directly lost all meaning of life. So in order to explore the meaning of his existence, Kabuto conducted a series of experiments on his own body. Kabuto Yakushi transplanted the cells of Orochimaru's white phosphorus Orochi into his own body, making his body infinitely closer to that of a white phosphorus Orochi. After contracting the Snake Clan, Kabuto Yakushi came to the Earth Dragon Cave secret jutsu that Orochimaru had vaguely mentioned in front of him before, which Orochimaru was very interested in. No one knew what Medicine Master Duo experienced inside the Earth Dragon Cave, but when Medicine Master Duo came out of the cave, his body had completely changed. His skin color has become pale white, and snake-like scale-like patterns spread all over his body. If you lift the loose robe on his body at this moment, you can see a white python stretching out from his abdomen. Kabuto's nature is extremely inferior, so Kabuto found feelings of approval from others again and again. At this moment, stepping on someone who was originally high and mighty under his feet, this feeling made Kabuto feel an extreme sense of existence. The reason why Kabuto wanted to participate in Obito's plan this time was that he was indeed attracted by the Tsukuyomi perfect world described by Obito, and he also hoped that he could leave a mark of his own in the history of the shinobi world. Regardless of whether the Tsukuyomi project will succeed or not, participating in it is Kabuto's hope. You can actually control the consciousness of the person who was reincarnated by the Edo Tensei? That's a good change. Black Zetsu's eyes were so sharp that he understood the variables in the moment when Kabuto controlled Nagato. At this moment, Nagato's eyes were full of anger, but his powerless appearance made Black Zetsu very interested. Then I'll let you see the other existences I've prepared. With that said, Kabuto controlled the coffin he summoned through the Edo Tensei and opened the lid one by one. Sure enough, the ones who appeared were the original members of the Akatsuki. Uchiha Itachi, Sasori, Deidara, Kakuzu, and Nagato, who was already under the control of Kabuto. Akatsuki's members who had already died, except for the half-dead Haiden and Konan who had just been killed by Obito, almost all of them were present. But who is in the extra coffin? Even Black Zetsu was a little interested. Seeing the curiosity in Black Zetsu's eyes, Kabuto's expression was also a little proud. He used chakra in his body to control the lid of the last coffin to open. A person wearing red plate armor with long hair like a hedgehog was lying quietly with his eyes closed. Although a pair of eyes were tightly closed, that kind of domineering aura was still emitted from this person who had his eyes closed. The moment Black Zetsu saw this person, he had already flashed to Kabuto's side. He grabbed Kabuto's neck with his hand, and Kabuto was directly lifted in the air by Black Zetsu. How dare you? After saying such a sentence to Kabuto, Black Zetsu turned his head to Obito, with a cold look in his eyes. He almost shouted the same sentence to Obito. How dare you? Chapter 538. The person lying in the coffin with his eyes closed and exuding a terrifying momentum is none other than Sandaime, the biggest shadow in Inoki's heart, the first Hokage of Woodleaf, the god of shinobi, Senja Takuma, the leader of the resurgence of the Uchiha clan, the biggest nightmare in the hearts of countless ninjas, Uchiha Madara. As we mentioned before, in Black Zetsu's heart, Uchiha Madara is the most important person, although we don't know whether this kind of importance is because Black Zetsu said that he is a consciousness derived from Uchiha Madara's Rinnegan, or some other reason. At this moment, Black Zetsu didn't seem to care about anything in the past. He directly attacked Yakushi's pocket and released a powerful aura towards Obito. At this moment, Black Zetsu's ability is far more powerful than when he was a sensor ninja. Sure enough, Black Zetsu is hiding something. Looking at the powerful momentum surging in Black Zetsu's body at this moment, Obito's heart flashed a hint of understanding. Black Zetsu definitely has a plan, otherwise, why would he hide his strength? Edo Tensei itself is not an easy ninjutsu to perform. To summon a ninja who has passed away back to the world, a lot of preparations are needed. First of all, a certain amount of DNA of the deceased is needed. If this condition is not met, then a living person is needed as a sacrifice, as a vessel for the reincarnated person, and finally, the soul of the reincarnated person must exist in the Pure Land. If the soul has been sealed, then it cannot be summoned. Although such a condition sounded simple, it was not so simple to satisfy it. Not to mention the living sacrifice and the soul not being sealed, how can Yakushi's pocket get enough DNA of Uchiha Madara? In addition to Black Zetsu, the only one who clearly knows the location of Uchiha Madara's body is Obito, who was cultivated by Uchiha Madara. So, where did Madara's DNA come from? It's not so hard to imagine. Obito summoned Uchiha Madara to test Black Zetsu's attitude and background. Obviously, Obito has achieved his goal, hasn't he? Black Zetsu, calm down. Looking at Black Zetsu's excited look, Obito stepped forward and patted Black Zetsu's shoulder, as if he wanted Black Zetsu not to be so impulsive. Then he said to Black Zetsu, "You're right. I know that you are the product of Uchiha Madara's consciousness, but that doesn't mean that you will always be his vassal. You are an independent person, you have your thoughts, you have your ambitions. Why do you have to bind yourself to the framework that Uchiha Madara set for you?" Obito glanced at Uchiha Madara, who was lying motionless in the coffin, and said to Black Zetsu, "Now, look at you, the nominal creator. Right now, he's just a sharp sword in our hands. He doesn't have a real Rinnegan, he doesn't have his own body, and he's even bound by us. Why should we let this person who has been eliminated by the times be so high above us? Why should we let such a person dominate us? Black Zetsu, learn to live for yourself. Obito's left eye that was transplanted with the Rinnegan slowly opened as he spoke, and the Sharingan that originally existed in his right eye also quickly turned into a Mangekyo Sharingan that surpassed the 3-Tomo Sharingan. At this moment, Obito was not only using his own words to confuse Black Zetsu, but also using his dojutsu to unconsciously influence Black Zetsu's judgment. Looking closely at Black Zetsu's eyes, Obito could clearly see some changes in them. The more he saw the ups and downs of the ninja world, the more he felt that he had seen the essence of human nature. Is there any loyalty in this world that will never change? Maybe some people have, but Black Zetsu, who has been with him for a long time, is not such a person. This is also the reason why Obito deliberately cooperated with Kabuto to test Black Zetsu. After tasting the sweetness of power, how can Obito allow himself to be controlled by a person without freedom? At this moment, although there was restraint in Black Zetsu's eyes, there was an obvious change hidden in them. All intelligent life forms in this world had a common desire, and that was freedom. Although Black Zetsu is not a normal life, but Black Zetsu has consciousness and wisdom beyond most people, so Black Zetsu's change at this moment is really a normal performance in Obito's eyes. I'm not afraid that you want too much, I'm afraid that you don't want anything. As long as you still have a desire, Obito has enough confidence to control such a person in his hands, and make the other party have no regrets. Isn't Nagato the best evidence? Live for myself? Hearing Obito's words, Black Zetsu's mouth slowly repeated the last sentence that Obito said, as if this sentence was a heavy hammer that hit the hidden existence in Black Zetsu's heart. Kabuto, who was held in Black Zetsu's hand but looked completely unmoved, after hearing Obito's words, his eyes flashed with envy and longing. And the performance of Black Zetsu and Kabuto was naturally reflected in Obito's eyes. Great things can be expected. In Obito's heart, there was only such a thought at this moment. Of course, Obito is not naive to think that Black Zetsu and Kabuto can completely change a person at this moment, but before the real outbreak of the war, Obito has enough confidence to rely on his silver tongue, Rinnegan, and Sharingan to make Black Zetsu and Kabuto truly submit to him. Black Zetsu slowly put down Kabuto, looked at Obito and then looked at Uchiha lying in the coffin, and then said, I can't say that I'm not tempted at all, but this is not enough to convince me. Madara-sama's body and soul are not to be desecrated. I hope you don't let Madara-sama return to the ninja world in such a way. Although there is still some resistance to such behavior, it's obvious that Black Zetsu has already relented. At the moment of life and death, he can abandon his respect for Uchiha Madara and let Uchiha Madara return to the ninja world through the Edo Tensei? This is really interesting. Chapter 539. After hearing Black Zetsu's words, Obito looked at Kabuto and nodded slowly. Kabuto quickly understood the meaning of Obito's words, and with his hand seals and chakra surging in his body, Nagato, who was originally under Kabuto's control, slowly walked into his coffin. Under Kabuto's control, the coffins continued to close one by one, and just like the coffins slowly emerged from the ground, the coffins also slowly sank into the ground. Obito waved to Kabuto, signaling him to leave with him. Now Black Zetsu was obviously in a confused state, but Obito, who was well aware of the changes in human nature, knew that although at this time, if he continued to say all kinds of words to Black Zetsu, he would definitely gain something. However, Obito wisely chose to give Black Zetsu a chance to relieve himself. It was easy to control a person for a while, but if you want to make the person completely take your words as his own creed, then you have to learn how to take it one step at a time. The days are long, and the time is long. Whether it's Black Zetsu or Kabuto, how can they escape from his hands? I, Uchiha Obito, am not willing to be anyone's chess piece. If you want me to join the big game of Shinobi World, then I must be the one who controls black and white. Obito and Kabuto left the secret cave together, leaving only Black Zetsu standing in the same place in silence. When Black Zetsu's spiritual power scanned everything around him, the originally silent Black Zetsu suddenly seemed like a different person. Step by step, he walked to the place where Uchiha Madara's coffin appeared. With a bit of contempt in his eyes, Black Zetsu slowly stepped on the ground where Uchiha Madara appeared. Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Obito. Nagato. Black Zetsu's mouth began to slowly recite the names of the people he had followed, but there was no uncontrollable anger in his eyes when he saw Uchiha Madara's soul being desecrated. The only one who can make me loyal is my mother. As for you? Obediently be a chess piece in my hands, and achieve my goal. You really think that you can control me with Rinnegan, Sharingan, and a little bit of bewitchment? You're really stupid. With that said, Black Zetsu's mouth couldn't help but let out a strange laughter. Although everything is a little rough, it's still within the scope of my plan. Mother, soon you will be able to return to this world. Looking at Namikaze Minato who was sitting in front of him, Nangongja's expression was calm, but his eyes still showed some gloominess. Hokage-sama, the fourth shinobi world war is coming. I don't know why Hokage-sama came to my house, a person who is not far from the mundane world. After Watergate came to Nangongja's house, he almost always talked about him. Finally, Nangongja was fed up with Watergate's behavior. So Nangongja directly said such rude words to Watergate, but Watergate didn't seem to care about Nangongja's rudeness. I don't think Nangong is a person who doesn't set foot in this world. Watergate's mouth had a bit of a smile. That kind of feeling made people feel like he was holding the pearl of wisdom. Such an expression made Nangongja very unhappy. It was as if Minato had something on him that could be used against him. The more powerful a person is, the more self-conscious he is. As long as others want to control him, then the anger in his heart can't be restrained. What do you mean? Although the malice in his heart was very strong, in the end, Nangongja still didn't intend to directly fall out with Watergate, so he said to Watergate. When Minato saw Nangongja's reaction, he said calmly, "That's right. Uchiha Sasuke must be in your house, right?" Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongja's heart was relieved. Because Nangongja was very confident that no one could find out that he hid Sasuke in his house, because just a few days ago, Nangongja opened the space channel to the Lion Clan's different space. Now Sasuke has returned to his parents in the Lion Clan's different space, so Nangongja didn't regard Sasuke's problem as a means to blackmail him. Watergate was very keenly aware that Nangongja was not nervous at all. Watergate knew that he used his strength in the wrong place. Seeing that Nangongja was about to open his mouth to say something, Watergate directly blocked all of Nangongja's words in his mouth. Bloody shirt. When he heard this word, it was obvious that Nangongja's pupils dilated slightly. These were all subconscious reactions. Even if a person could control his facial expression, there was no way to change such an almost instinctive reaction. Before coming, Watergate learned such a trick from Moriabiki, the head of the Woodleaf Interrogation Department. Obviously, such a trick was indeed very effective. Nangongja didn't think that Watergate would say such a thing without evidence. Since Watergate dared to say such a word in front of him, then there must be a reason. Under the persecution of Danzo, Nangong Jonin had left the Woodleaf for a period of time. Watergate looked at Nangongja and said slowly, and it was during this period of time that the Bloody Shirt Pavilion, which had always been a hidden force in the shinobi world, suddenly appeared in the shinobi world. Moreover, the Bloody Shirt Pavilion changed its previous passive attitude and began to actively expand its power. Through various methods, the prestige of the Bloody Shirt Pavilion in the shinobi world is getting higher and higher. Through such operations, the Bloody Shirt Pavilion has even faintly become the sixth major force in the shinobi world. If it wasn't for the fact that the Bloody Shirt Pavilion is not a traditional shinobi force, I think the Bloody Shirt Pavilion would have become a member of this Five Kages conference. And Nangong Jonin has also shown his powerful intelligence system many times before. In addition to the 5 major shinobi villages, only the Bloody Shirt Pavilion has such an intelligence system, right? And even if my previous guesses are my own blind guesses, there is one thing that can't be changed. That is, Nangong Jonan, the power you practice is not something else, but the internal energy system of the Bloody Shirt Pavilion. Chapter 540. In fact, the so-called evidence in Watergate's mouth wasn't very convincing evidence. Just by relying on such a conjecture, it's impossible to directly link Nangong and the Bloodcloak Pavilion. But this isn't a court, and Watergate doesn't need any impeccable evidence. As long as Watergate is willing to believe, then no one will have the opportunity to criticize. This is the current Konoha, and this is the current fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, whose reputation is at its peak. Originally, from Nangong's point of view, Woodleaf is a good place to settle down. After all, Woodleaf is one of the few forces in the shinobi world that is full of human feelings. Even the Bloodcloak Pavilion, which Nangongja brought up, has a clear distinction between superior and inferior. Having human feelings is an advantage, but also a disadvantage, because sufficient human feelings also means a certain degree of ambiguity between superior and inferior. In other ninja villages, there are very few existences that can be compared with Kage. And in Woodleaf, Watergate hasn't really made a move yet, but it has almost become a tripartite situation of Root, Elder Group, and Hokage. Indeed, only when power is balanced can it be fair. But in the ninja world, when is there a need for fairness? To a large extent, the strong devour the weak, and the strong are above all the weak. Fairness? Where did this joke come from? Fourth Hokage-sama. After listening to Watergate's words, and instantly figured out the key points, Nangongja looked at Watergate sitting opposite him, and said the full name of Minato Watergate. This attitude is enough to see how indignant Nangongja is about Watergate's current actions. If you can imagine, Nangongja is now like putting his sword on Watergate's neck. Do you know what you are doing now? Nangongja's eyes were filled with endless anger, even the air around Nangongja seems to have dropped several degrees because of Nangongja's anger at this moment. In my life, I hate people who threaten me. The last person who dared to threaten me like this is Shimura Danzo, who died in your hands. At this moment, Nangongja's words were actually very straightforward. At this moment, Nangongja is telling Watergate that if Watergate dares to threaten him, then he will put Watergate in Shimura Danzo's position. Since you dare to threaten me, then you should be prepared to become my enemy. After hearing Nangongja's words, Watergate did not show the same agitation as Nangongja. After all, compared to a slightly simple organization like the Blood Garment Pavilion, the Woodleaf is simply a complicated organization. Watergate was able to rush out of such a chaotic situation and control the Woodleaf in his own hands. Watergate's methods are definitely more complicated than Nangongja's. Nangongja, please don't be agitated. I'm not here to threaten you, I'm here to ask for your help. Although Shui Men made a request and seemed to be very kind, the more he acted like this, the more Nangongja felt indescribable disgust in his eyes. At this moment, Watergate is the kind of politician that Nangongja dislikes the most. As a swordsman, dark and boring things like politics are simply the most annoying existence. I'm not here to investigate what kind of relationship you have with the Blood Garment Pavilion, Nangongja, but to protect the future of the shinobi world. Nangongja has participated in this 5 Kage conference with me. You are also very clear about the declaration of war from Akatsuki. Pulling the entire shinobi world into the Tsukuyomi world, how crazy and inhumane is such a plan? Watergate said, and a dazzling light bloomed in his eyes. That light looked very upright, just like the embodiment of justice. However, Nangongja ignored this seemingly righteous light. What Nangongja saw was the unquenchable pursuit of power and fame in the depths of Minato's eyes. Nangongja, as the Hokage of Woodleaf Village, as one of the countless shinobi in the shinobi world, I request you to contact the Blood Garment Pavilion and let the Blood Garment Pavilion become a member of our shinobi allied forces. Watergate tried to make his eyes full of sincerity, and even seemed to be excited in his heart. He sat up a little from his original kneeling position, and stretched out a hand in front of Nan Gongzhi, as if he wanted to let Nan Gongzhi hold his hand firmly. If it were other people, they might have been moved by Watergate's words just now. But Nan Gongzhi is different. To put it bluntly, Nan Gongzhi is an extremely selfish person. Except for the things he cares about, Nan Gongzhi is in a state of indifference. Indeed, if Akatsuki's Eye of the Moon project really becomes a reality, the entire shinobi world will become the target of Akatsuki. For Watergate and even all shinobi, this is an unacceptable reality. Let yourself become a member of an illusory world, and let others control your life wantonly. Don't joke around. If Nan Gongzhi was an ordinary ninja, then he would definitely choose to cooperate with Minato under the pressure of having no way out. But can Nan Gongzhi really only stay in the shinobi world? Nan Gongzhi is not without a way out. The Lion Clan space hidden in the void is Nan Gongzhi's biggest trump card. Even if the shinobi world is really in the hands of Akatsuki, Nan Gongzhi can go to the Lion Clan space to live. Nan Gongzhi is not without a way out. Shinobi world? Shinobi allied forces? Looking at Watergate, Nan Gongzhi slowly muttered the words Watergate just said in his mouth. So, this is the way to save the shinobi world? Nan Gongzhi left the meeting of the 5 Kage early, so he didn't know the specific plan of Watergate and the other 4. Although there is a very strong smell of war in the wood leaf in the past few days, Nan Gongzhi didn't have much interest in knowing what happened. Saving the shinobi world. Saving the future. What a noble action. Looking at Watergate, Nan Gongzhi's mouth suddenly hung a bit of a smile, but in Watergate's eyes, it was full of ridicule. I refuse. Since you have already guessed my identity, then I will say it directly. I am the head of the Blood Robe Pavilion, the highest leader of the Blood Robe Pavilion. Now, on behalf of the Blood Robe Pavilion, I declare to you that the Blood Robe Pavilion will not join the so-called shinobi allied forces. Chapter 541. As a person who pursues strength, the most important thing is to see one's own heart clearly. Watergate was like this, and Nan Gongzhi was the same. People have to examine themselves again and again to make great progress. Nan Gongzhi was able to reach this step naturally because he examined his own heart countless times. Nan Gongzhi did fight for the wood leaf, but that was not because Nan Gongzhi recognized the wood leaf, but because Nan Gongzhi almost coincidentally brought his young sister to a small town under the wood leaf. If Nan Gongzhi happened to go to Sunagakure or Kyumo Shinobu, Nan Gongzhi also had the possibility of joining these ninja villages. For Nan Gongzhi, Woodleaf was not a special existence. It was just a place he passed by. The current Woodleaf for Nan Gongzhi was far inferior to the Blood Cloth Pavilion. After all, the Blood Cloth Pavilion was the power in Nan Gongzhi's own hands. If he had to compare, the Blood Cloth Pavilion could be regarded as his own home. This is why every time Nan Gongzhi helped Woodleaf, it was only because of a whim or a fair exchange of interests. But now, Watergate wanted to use this kind of method mixed with threats to let Nan Gongzhi and even the Blood Cloth Pavilion behind Nan Gongzhi directly participate in the ninja allied forces decided by the 5 Kages Conference. But now that the 5 Kages Conference is over, the various positions in such an allied forces must have been allocated. Now that the Blood Cloth Pavilion was involved in such a situation, what role would the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion play in it? They would be nothing more than cannon fodder. The Blood Cloth Pavilion was the power in his hands, and Nan Gongzhi would never allow anyone to treat the Blood Cloth Pavilion as a dispensable consumable. When he heard Nan Gongzhi unabashedly admit that he was the supreme leader of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, Watergate had already expected that Nan Gongzhi would refuse his invitation with a relatively strong attitude. Watergate has never underestimated any strong person, let alone Nan Gongzhi, who he was not sure he could control. I'm being rude, but the shinobi world needs the help of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I hope you can consider it carefully. After all, we can't guarantee that we can successfully defeat the Akatsuki with only the ninja allied forces. In order to protect the future of the ninja world, even without the participation of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, we will do our best. Watergate apologized to Nangongzhi, but when he spoke, the words ninja allied forces, defeat, and do our best were particularly clear. There is also a saying in the ninja world, that is, to resist foreign aggression, one must first stabilize the internal situation. If you want to win a war, you must maintain stability in your own camp. Although the Blood Cloth Pavilion has not yet made clear which side they are on, and some of the conflicts between the Blood Cloth Pavilion and the Akatsuki are relatively secret things, Watergate did not know. Seeing that Watergate was still putting pressure on him verbally, Nangongzhi's mood became worse and worse. Taking a deep look at Watergate, Nangongzhi looked at Watergate and said coldly, "See the guest out." Although he has tried his best to restrain himself, the majestic anger hidden in it can't be suppressed. And Watergate knew that he can't continue to speak, the pressure is enough, so he doesn't need to continue to add fuel to the fire and let Nangongzhi directly explode here. Nodding to Nangongzhi, Watergate didn't wait for Mashiro sitting on the side to send him to the door, he has already walked to the side of the door and directly opened the door and walked out. When Watergate has already walked away, Nangongzhi finally didn't need to suppress the anger in his heart, he directly slapped the short table in front of him. Bang! Obviously it was just such a slap, but it made a terrible sound like a tsunami hitting a boulder. After such a slap, Nangongzhi finally realized that he can't show such an attitude in front of his family, so he slightly apologized to Mashiro sitting on his side and said, "Sorry, I'm really..." Before Nangongzhi finished speaking, Mashiro directly went to Nangongzhi's side and hugged the kneeling on the ground. Hugging Nangongzhi's head, Mashiro put his mouth beside Nangongzhi's ear, not knowing if he is comforting himself or Nangongzhi, his mouth softly whispered, it's okay, Little Linger and Nangongro, who have been hiding in their room, also opened a gap in their room and looked at Nangongzhi sitting on the ground with Mashiro hugging his head. Little Linger's eyes were very pure, but there was a hint of worry in them. But at this moment, Nangongro's eyes were more complicated. The sadness, worry, reluctance, helplessness, and relief mixed together like paint appeared in Nangongro's eyes. But in the end, Little Linger and Nangongro closed their room door, because what Nangongzhi needs now, only Mashiro can give it to him. Feeling the questions from Mashiro and listening to Mashiro's comforting words, Nangongzhi finally calmed down. Nangongzhi has been pursuing a peaceful life all his life, but one troublesome thing after another directly crashed into him. When Nangongzhi was still weak, he could only passively accept this kind of coercion. But now, Nangongzhi has become one of the strongest people in the shinobi world, and only a few people can beat him in terms of power. But now, he has clearly grown and become stronger, but in the face of the general trend, he still looks so powerless. This kind of gap, 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 and this kind of gap made Nangongzhi very unacceptable. But as a mature enough person, although there is no way to perfectly control his emotions in some situations, he must adjust himself after a period of time. At this moment, Nangongzhi naturally adjusted himself with the help of Mashiro. Finally, Nangongzhi got rid of his anger just now, slowly stood up and opened the paper door in his living room. The wind rushed from the outside into the room, blowing the white robe on Nangongzhi's body, and blew the short table that Nangongzhi just slapped into a cloud of dust. Chapter 542. The light outside the room passed through Nangongzhi's shoulder-length hair, and for a moment, Nangongzhi's figure became blurred. The noon sun was a bit hot, and at this moment, when the light sprinkled on Nangongzhi's body, the light suddenly became distorted. The distorted light attached to Nangongzhi's body, and it felt like a layer of fire was burning on Nangongzhi's body. Of course, such a flame didn't appear for no reason, because at this moment, the vast internal force in Nangongzhi's body began to surge crazily. When the huge internal force surged, it was inevitable that a small amount of internal force seeped out of Nangong's skin, and it was this penetration of internal force that made Nangong's body appear magical signs of a flame. We can't just sit here and wait for death. Facing the scenery outside the room and feeling the heat from the midday sun, Nangongja spoke softly but firmly, "I'm sorry. The Fourth Shinobi World War is a war that swept the entire shinobi world, and it is a tribulation for anyone. But it is precisely because of all kinds of tribulations that the world can usher in real progress. This time, facing the threat from Akatsuki and Jubi, the 5 great shinobi villages can unite together to form the shinobi allied forces. Such a thing is really unprecedented," Nangongja said, and his eyes were full of emotion. After all, when he was not so strong, he was a woodleaf shinobi who fought in the shinobi world. It is precisely because he participated in such a war that Nangongja can understand more than others what kind of hostile existence the 5 great shinobi villages are in the shinobi world. Years of war have made each shinobi village have deep hatred between each other. To put it bluntly, if a shinobi from a hostile shinobi village comes to another shinobi village, even if he only kills a civilian, it may be regarded as revenge instead of invasion. The war between the generations, the accumulation of hatred between the generations. So far, after the establishment of the 5 great shinobi villages, there have been 3 large-scale battles that lasted for several years, and after that, there were countless small-scale and medium-scale battles or conflicts. In order to make their shinobi villages stronger, the 5 great shinobi villages have secretly used a lot of small means. This kind of hatred can't be offset by a mere agreement. If such a shinobi allied forces is really pulled into the battlefield, it's hard to say whether they can exert 1/3 of their strength. But there are disadvantages. Naturally there are advantages. And advantages can be fully displayed after overcoming these disadvantages. First, the 5 great shinobi villages. Compared to the 5 great shinobi villages, the biggest advantage is their own heritage. The great shinobi villages, the great shinobi shinobis, the great shinobi villages, shinobi, the great shinobi villages, resources. If alls if shinobi 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 shinobi, shinobi on the other hand, the Akatsuki, how long has the founder of this organization been active in the shinobi world? Even if they have saved a lot of money over the years, but compared to the savings of the 5 great shinobi villages, it's a bit small. So if the war really falls into a quagmire and becomes a tug of war that may drag on for a long time, then the strength of the 5 great shinobi villages will undoubtedly be shown in toughness. Second, it's the people's hearts. The words that Watergate used to persuade Nangongja are actually very effective for many ninjas. As a ninja, they often come into contact with the people and things on the dark side of the shinobi world. Even if they have a sunny nature, it's impossible to guarantee that their nature is not affected at all. Think about the reason why most ninjas accept the task. It's nothing more than money or fame. But can such things really bring a person enough satisfaction to offset all the dark realities they come into contact with? At this time, the appearance of the shinobi allied forces gives all ninjas a reason to become a spiritual pillar, to save the shinobi world, to save the future. Third, this advantage is not an advantage in the war, but if the 5 great shinobi villages become the winner, it will bring changes to the shinobi world. There were many ways to generate the most sincere feelings between people, but comrade in arms was the most common way to generate sincere feelings. For a person who can entrust his life to him, the most sincere feelings will naturally be born. Originally, such emotions will only appear between ninjas of the same shinobi village, but such a shinobi allied forces only gives the 5 great shinobi villages an opportunity to understand and recognize each other. If the Kage of the 5 great shinobi villages can have enough vision of the overall situation and enough love for peace, then such an alliance may become an opportunity to bring long-term peace to the shinobi world. These 3 points are the advantages that Nangongja believes that the shinobi allied forces has, and for Nangongja, the most noteworthy point is the last one: if the shinobi allied forces wins the final victory, the relationship between the 5 great shinobi villages will rise sharply and ease. Then as an internal force practitioner organization, the Blood Cloak Pavilion, which is different from the shinobi world, will go. People often say, if you are not of the same race, your heart will be different. For a ninja, is an internal force cultivator a different kind of race from him? The reason why chakra practitioners are respected in the shinobi world is naturally because in the long history of chakra, the practitioners of chakra have relied on their own advantages to defeat all kinds of cultivation inheritances. If the 5 great shinobi forces in the shinobi world unite, to a certain extent, it is equivalent to gathering all the ninjas who have the right to speak in the shinobi world. Whether it is a ninja or an internal force practitioner, if they want to grow, in fact, they also need a variety of resources. If such resources can't be obtained from other ninjas, then they can only be obtained from some people other than ninjas, such as internal force practitioners. As the pride of the known internal force practitioners in the shinobi world, Nangongja doesn't want internal force to disappear in the long river of history. Chapter 543. At any time, he can't let himself fall into the rhythm of others, whether it's in battle or other things. This time, beyond Nangongja's expectation, because of the sudden intervention of Uchiha Obito, which was originally just a game between the 5 Kage villages, it became a game between Akatsuki and the entire ninja world. Because at that time, Nangongja wanted to take Uchiha Sasuke back to Woodleaf Ninja Village for treatment as soon as possible, so he couldn't rely on his identity as the leader of the Blood Cloth Pavilion to participate in such a division of interests and alliance of forces in time. Now it seems that he's already one step slower than the other. But that's only for now. Mashiro, get ready now. Nangongja looked very ferocious at this moment. He didn't look like a wounded beast when he was in Mashiro's arms. On the contrary, he looked more like a lion patrolling his territory in the vast savanna, imposing and unrivaled. After hearing Nangongja's words, Mashiro's face also showed a smile. Although he can accept any state of Nangongja, in Mashiro's heart, the one that he likes the most, the one that makes him feel like Nangongja's true attitude is the current one. First, bring Ruru and Little Linger to the Blood Cloth Pavilion and properly settle them down. You also clearly heard the conversation between me and Watergate just now, because of the emotional fluctuation just now, to a certain extent, it can be regarded as a falling out between me and Watergate. Although he has been saying that he and Watergate have fallen out, Nangongja's eyes didn't have any similar feelings of worry at this moment. Instead, he was very calm. Even if Mtitai collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. At this moment, Nangongja's calm demeanor was vividly displayed. Minato already has the idea of dragging the blood-robed pavilion into the quagmire of war, and letting the disciples of the blood-robed pavilion become cannon fodder who will only contribute without any return. Once Watergate has such an idea in his heart, it won't be easy to erase it. Now, because of what I just said, Minato already knows what kind of position I have in the Blood Cloak Pavilion. This point has advantages and disadvantages for our current situation. After knowing my identity, Watergate will be more cautious in his thinking and actions, which will buy us some time to prepare. During this time, we don't have to worry about the threat from Watergate. Therefore, I think that the first thing we have to do is to make sure that Watergate doesn't have any means to threaten me. Everyone knows that I care about my family, so the first thing we have to do is to ensure the safety of Little Linger and Ruru. If necessary, we can directly send Little Linger and Ruru to the Lion Clan's alternate space. That place is a fantasy land that won't be invaded by others. Hearing Nangongja's words, Mashiro slowly nodded. After all, in the Blood Cloth Pavilion headquarters, Nangongja had secretly set up a spatial coordinate point. In this spatial coordinate point, as long as Nangongja's internal force, sword chi, and natural energy were mixed with a certain ratio, it could become the key to open the alternate space to the Lion Clan's alternate space. In Nangongja's head seal, there is enough mixed energy to open the array. Even Sasuke has it, how can Mashiro not have it? After remembering Nangongji's words, Mashiro then looked at Nangongji. Obviously, he knew that Nangongji still has the next arrangement. After settling Little Linger and Ruru, you immediately inform the Blood Cloth Pavilion to start shrinking their combat power. Gather all the disciples who are comparable to Chunin and above. Each division will provide 50 places, gather all the top 50 disciples together, and receive protection with Little Linger and Ruru. If something goes wrong, immediately open the teleportation array and let these seeds enter the alternate space for protection. Shrinking their combat power. Such an arrangement is no different from directly preparing for war. But just now, Nangongji didn't accept Watergate's invitation, so how will Nangongji join the war? Zhenbai, spread what I'm about to say to the entire Blood Garment Pavilion. With that said, Nangongji's eyes flashed with light. Our Blood Cloth Pavilion is a gathering place of internal strength cultivators that is different from the mainstream forces of the shinobi world. Before I inherited the position of head, we have been living in seclusion and in a state of being bullied in this world. There is a saying that goes like this: those who are not of our clan must have a different heart. For these ninjas, we are different from them. So we have been bullied in many places. Some ninjas who are only Chunin or even Genin are walking in the shinobi world rely on their own shinobi village to do whatever they want, and some of us who are comparable to Chunin don't get the respect we deserve. That's illogical. This is what I don't want to see as the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and as an internal strength cultivator. And now, there is an opportunity in front of us. What is about to happen in the shinobi world will be the largest battle that may take place in the past 100 years or even hundreds of years. A large number of ninjas will participate in such a war, and I don't know how many legendary powerhouses who are famous in the shinobi world will lose their lives in it, and more legendary powerhouses will be born in such a war. The golden scale was originally a fish in the pool, but it will become a dragon when it encounters the wind and clouds. Ninjas are recognized as the golden scale, but we internal strength cultivators can also become the so-called golden scale of the dragon. Hearing Nangongji's ambitious words, Mashiro's eyes became more and more blazing. Usually, Nangongji seems to be living in seclusion in the wood leaf, but does Nangongji really have no desire? Of course not. The reason why Nangongji usually looks like he has seen through the world is because these trivial things don't touch the raging flame in Nangongji's heart. This time, facing the threat from the water sect, the ambition in Nangongji's heart, which was originally just a small flame, seemed to have been poured with tung oil, and began to turn into a huge fire that burned the sky. Chapter 544. That's right, from the beginning to the end, Nangongji wasn't ready to join any force. In this Fourth Shinobi World War, there were actually only two hostile forces on the surface. One was the ninja allied forces led by the 5 major shinobi villages, including the 5 major shinobi villages and the small shinobi villages affiliated with the 5 major shinobi villages. The second was the Akatsuki that annexed the Rain village. Neither of these forces was suitable for the blood-robed pavilion to join. The Akatsuki itself had been hostile to the blood-robed pavilion for a period of time before. Even now, many people in the blood-robed pavilion would gnash their teeth when mentioning the Akatsuki. After all, the Akatsuki had attacked the headquarters of the blood-robed pavilion before, trying to coerce the blood-robed pavilion to become their subordinate force. Although the blood-robed pavilion didn't suffer too much loss because of the appearance of Nangongji, many disciples of the blood-robed pavilion were seriously injured or even killed. Most of the disciples of the blood-robed pavilion in the headquarters were women, children, old and weak who didn't have much combat power. Although these people didn't have powerful strength, they were also the family members of most of the powerful disciples in the blood-robed pavilion. Their family members were hurt by others, which was more infuriating than their own injuries. Therefore, even if it wasn't for Nangongji's personal feelings, it was absolutely impossible for the blood-robed pavilion to unite with the Akatsuki. The ninja allied forces led by the 5 major shinobi villages was also not a good choice. Compared to the Akatsuki, the Allied forces led by the 5 major shinobi villages were more bureaucratic to a certain extent, or more focused on the benefits they could obtain. Namikaze Watergate, Ai, Terumi Mei, Anoki, and Gara. Of the 5 major shinobi villages, perhaps only Gara, who hadn't been in the position for a long time, still had some young blood and impulse in his heart. As for the other 4 Kages, they were all old foxes who had experienced the world. If the blood-robed pavilion really joined the ninja allied forces directly, it wouldn't be far from being gnawed to the bone. Nangongja didn't want to take such a risk, but he couldn't let the blood-clothing pavilion stay out of this and face the possible situation of being besieged on all sides. Therefore, what Nangongja wanted to do at this moment was to show the power of the blood-robed pavilion to the entire shinobi world, letting everyone know that the blood-robed pavilion was not an existence that could be easily manipulated by others. And the behavior that can cause such an effect is to enter the war as a third party, destroying the situation between the Allied forces and Akatsuki. The Blood Garment Pavilion was going to become a shit-stirrer that would mess up everyone's plans. I understand. I will inform the Blood Garment Pavilion now and pass on the order you just gave as soon as possible. Mashiro looked at Nangongja, who was in high spirits and full of ambition. Her eyes were filled with love. This was the man she had fallen in love with. Although there were times when he broke down and felt helpless, he could bear any difficulties no matter what. He was a man who would never give in to anyone or anything. Sorry to trouble you, Mashiro. This war is also an opportunity for us. Although the blood-robed pavilion has developed into a force second only to the 5 major shinobi villages in the shinobi world, the gap between us and the 5 major shinobi villages is still very obvious. Even the Sunagakure, which is at the bottom of the 5 major shinobi villages, is actually stronger than us. Let's seize this opportunity and really push the blood-robed pavilion to the same level as the 5 major shinobi villages, or even beyond the 5 major shinobi villages. This is not for those illusory and meaningless ambitions. What I want to do is to let everyone know that I, Nangongja, and my blood-robed pavilion are not a target that anyone can mess with unscrupulously. If there was someone who understood Nangongja better in this world, even his sister, Nangongro, couldn't compare with Mashiro. After all, Nangongja's protection of Nangongro was too strong. Although Nangongro also had the qualities of a ninja, after all, the darkness that she had seen before was deliberately filtered by Nangongja, so in fact, Nangongro didn't know much about some dark things. Mashiro, on the other hand, couldn't tolerate it. Although Mashiro was trained as a basic undercover with no strength when he was en route, even the shallowest darkness en route was enough to make a person unable to accept it. Mashiro was able to make a name for himself in such a place, so naturally, he had experienced a lot of things. After being saved by Nangongja, Mashiro had intervened in a lot of internal and external affairs of the blood-robed pavilion with Nangongja's acquiescence, and his ability had been greatly improved. Until now, although Mashiro didn't have an official position in the blood-robed pavilion, everyone regarded Mashiro as the second-in-command of the blood-robed pavilion. It was precisely because he understood Nangongja that Mashiro could understand that what Nangongja said now wasn't deliberately dignified, but it was really Nangongja's own thoughts. Power was never something that Nangongja pursued. Everything that Nangongja did was actually for self-protection. Even now, if it wasn't for the aggressive coercion of Bokaze and Watergate in his home, Nangongja might not have been able to make the blood-robed pavilion join the 4th Shinobi World War as a third-party force. Then I'll go arrange the relevant matters first. After walking to Nangongja's side, Mashiro slowly said goodbye to Nangongja and left Nangongja's room. Mobilizing the power of the entire blood-robed pavilion wasn't something that could be done with just a few words. Mashiro might be busy for a while now, right? Watching Mashiro walk out of his room, Nangongja slowly raised his hands. The warmth of Mashiro's embrace just now seemed to still be a little bit left at this moment. A gentle smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and Nangongja's eyes became more and more firm. This kind of warmth, I will never allow it to disappear. Humph. Since all of you are so greedy for the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the power that I possess, then I will let all of you have a good look at how powerful the power that all of you desire is, and how terrifying a true Yama is. I didn't want to compete with the world, but the world insisted on making me fall into the mortal world. Since that's the case, I will raise my sword, sing for me, and let the world taste the sharpness of the sword in my hand. Picking up the Heaven's Disaster sword beside him, Nangongja slowly walked into the secret room of his home. With a flash of light, Nangongja had already walked into the space passage leading to the Lion Clan space. Chapter 545. There was no sun in the Lion Clan space itself, but there was a change between day and night, which was very magical. Even Li Yang, who guarded the space, didn't understand the mystery. But the change between day and night was not so important for a person. Sasuke slowly touched his eyes covered with white gauze with his hand, and a wry smile flashed on his mouth. It turned out that my brother relied on such a pair of eyes to face all kinds of difficulties and uses from Akatsuki and Wood Leaf alone? That's right, although Sasuke has Manjikyu Sharingan, it's only Manjikyu and not Eternal Manjikyu, so Sasuke actually suffers from serious vision decline and complications caused by a large lack of eye power like Itachi before. After obtaining Manjikyu Sharingan, although Sasuke also deliberately wanted to save his eye power, but in order to master Manjikyu Sharingan as soon as possible, Sasuke's eyes also bear tremendous pressure. And at the 5 Kages tournament, because of some instigation by Hoodlum, that is, Uchiha Obito, Sasuke couldn't control his emotions for a while, and directly appeared at the 5 Kages tournament, and launched an attack on Shimura Danzo, who was disguised as Mifune, the leader of the Land of Iron Samurai. He used Amaterasu again and again, used Katan, Kagetsuchi again and again, and several times when his Manjikyu Sharingan was overwhelmed, he forcibly used Susanoo. Such a high-intensity, short-term use of his Manjikyu Dojutsu naturally made Sasuke's Manjikyu Sharingan deteriorate rapidly. By now, Sasuke's eyes could only see some vague light, and in order to prevent Sasuke's eyes from being stimulated more, Sasuke's mother Uchiha Mikoto also made some ointment based on some prescriptions passed down from the Uchiha clan that were said to alleviate the lack of eye power, and covered Sasuke's eyes with a layer of white gauze. But although his eyes have become almost blind, Sasuke's perception is still sharp. Sasuke slowly stood up from his small chair. Even without using his eyes, Sasuke still walked to the gate of his courtyard with his 5 senses and slowly opened the gate. Nangong Laosher, why did you suddenly come? Sasuke said to Nangongja. His voice was a little tired, but it was also deliberately free and easy. Nangongja looked at Sasuke, whose eyes were wrapped in white gauze, standing in front of him. He didn't react for a while. After all, when he sent Sasuke to the Lion Clan's different space, Sasuke was still sleeping. Nangongja didn't know much about the condition of Sasuke's eyes. But for the drawbacks of Manjikyu Sharingan, Nangongja still knew a little about it. After all, he had a lot of cooperation with Itachi before. Hearing that Nangongja didn't talk to him for a long time, Sasuke didn't get tired of it. Instead, he seemed very enthusiastic to Nangongja and said, Nangong Laosher, why don't you come in and sit for a while? Standing at the door like this, if others see you, they will say that our Uchiha family doesn't know etiquette. Maybe because of the change in mentality, Sasuke actually said something to Nangongja. After all, in the Lion Clan's different space, except for the Uchiha family and Nangong family, there are no other human beings. Hearing Sasuke's words, Nangongja's slightly heavy mood also became slightly lighter. Finally, after a long sigh, Nangongja said to Sasuke, Sasuke, I need your help. For a long time, between the relationship between Sasuke and Nangongja, Sasuke was actually the one who was helped by Nangongja. He began to learn Kenjutsu under the guidance of Nangongja since he was a child, and with the approval of Nangongja, he left Woodleaf Village and joined Orochimaru. After joining Orochimaru, he kept in touch with Nangongzhe. After killing Orochimaru, he met his brother with the help of Nangongzhe. For Sasuke, Nangongzhe was actually a very important person. Even when he was young, Nangongzhe's role replaced Fugaku's father position in Sasuke's heart. After hearing Nangongzhe's request for help, Sasuke nodded to Nangongzhe without hesitation, and then said, "Nangong-sensei, you don't have to do this. As long as I can do it, I will naturally help you without hesitation." After hearing Sasuke's words, Nangongzhe's expression didn't relax, but became more and more unnatural, because Nangongzhe knew how difficult it was for Sasuke to accept his request at this moment. "I need your help. I need you, who has the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan beyond Manjikyu Sharingan, to help me." With the relationship between the two, almost when Sasuke learned that there was the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan above Manjikyu Sharingan, Nangongzhe also knew such a thing. With the power beyond Manjikyu Sharingan and the power of the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, the energy contained in such a pair of eyes is beyond imagination. And if Blood Cloak Pavilion is enough to pry open the joint layout of the 5 major ninja villages and Akatsuki to produce the 4th Shinobi World War, such a pair of eyes beyond common sense is very important. After all, Akatsuki still has the existence of Manjikyu Sharingan, and only Sharingan is the best way to fight against Sharingan. As long as Sasuke can have the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, then Sasuke will be a trump card in his hand, an important means to win. But to evolve his Manjikyu Sharingan into the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, he needs to transplant the Manjikyu Sharingan of his immediate family into his own eyes. Now it is known that the only person who has Manjikyu Sharingan and has a direct relationship with Sasuke is the dead Itachi Uchiha. To disturb Itachi's peace after his death, transplant Itachi's eyes into his own eyes, and then help Nangongzhe? No matter which choice he chooses, it will be a torment for Sasuke. After all, for Sasuke, Itachi and Nangongzhe are very important people to him. Now such a choice is to put Itachi and Nangongzhe on the scale, and let Sasuke weigh the weight of the two people. Such a thing is very difficult for Sasuke, and he is unwilling to accept it. Chapter 546. At this moment, Sasuke fell into a tangled mood as expected. Although his eyes were wrapped in white gauze, making it impossible to see the struggle in Sasuke's eyes, Sasuke's slightly frowned eyebrows exposed from the white gauze were enough for Nangongzhe to see the tangled feelings in Sasuke's heart at this moment. In fact, Nangongzhe couldn't bear to make such a move that was close to forcing Sasuke. But if he wanted to realize his plan, the power of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan was indispensable. "Sasuke, I don't want you to think that I'm forcing you to make a choice between me and your brother. I know how deep the relationship between you and Itachi is. Although Itachi has left the world now, I also know that it's hard for you to accept taking out Itachi's eyes and transplanting them into your own eyes." In the end, Nangongzhe still didn't want to force Sasuke to make such a cruel choice. Nangongzhe's words were indeed from his own heart, and there was no other meaning. But when Sasuke heard it, Sasuke felt even more pressure. "Nangong-sensei." Finally, after a long silence, Sasuke spoke to Nangongzhe. After hearing Sasuke's silent tone, Nangongzhe knew that he might have to find another way to let Blood Cloak Pavilion have the qualifications to enter the battlefield. After experiencing an inner struggle, Sasuke finally made a decision. Although Nangongzhe was also full of kindness to him, if he wanted to repay Nangongzhe, he would have to disturb the peace of Itachi Uchiha's body. Sasuke really didn't want to do such a thing. So Sasuke's words at this moment were actually to refuse Nangongzhe. But when Sasuke's words were not finished, a person slowly walked behind Sasuke. He had a square face with sharp edges and corners. His black hair was not long and was about to reach his cheekbones. But at this moment, because of the pressure of losing the Uchiha clan's patriarch and the long-term dull life in the Lion clan's different space, he looked a lot gentler. This person was the former patriarch of the Uchiha clan, the captain of the Woodleaf police force, Itachi Uchiha, and Uchiha Sasuke's father, Uchiha Fugaku. Uchiha Fugaku slowly walked to Sasuke's side and put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. Although Sasuke didn't stay with Uchiha Fugaku most of the time over the years, as a child, Uchiha Sasuke was still very much in awe of his father. When Fugaku's hand pressed on Sasuke's shoulder, Sasuke had a rare feeling of peace in his heart. His body, which had become slightly trembling because of guilt and torment because he wanted to refuse Nangongja's request, calmed down under Fugaku's hand. Patriarch Fugaku. Seeing Fugaku walking to his side, Nangongja didn't lose his manners and greeted Fugaku with the attitude of a junior. After hearing Nangongja's words, Fugaku's face showed an indifferent smile that was very inconsistent with his former iron-blooded style. After waving his hand, he said to Nangongja, "Nangong-sama, you don't have to be like this. Now, the real Uchiha clan is only left with us and Yuri Koyuri. So, there's no need to mention the title of Patriarch anymore. Although my surname is Uchiha, I exist in this world as a husband and a father named Fugaku." Fugaku was also a person who had experienced ups and downs. Fugaku was once the patriarch of the Woodleaf clan. The power in his hands was not monstrous, but it was not much different. After experiencing the failure of the coup and the massacre of the Uchiha clan, Fugaku finally saw through the world. At this moment, his state of mind was obviously at a level that ordinary people couldn't reach. Mr. Fugaku is really a magnanimous person. For Uchiha Fugaku's current mentality, Nangongja was actually very admirable. After all, a person who could bear the pain of failure and endure the loneliness in the Lion clan's different space was worthy of admiration. I also heard a little of what you two said just now. It seems that Nangong-sama really needs Sasuke to use Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan to assist you? Fugaku didn't make any pretentious gestures and seemed very frank to Nangongja and Sasuke. Although he said that he heard a little, Fugaku also heard almost all of what Sasuke and Nangongja just said. After hearing Fugaku's words, Sasuke's body trembled. Because at this moment, Sasuke didn't know what his father was planning to do at this moment. What if his father directly rejected Nangongja on behalf of him? What if his father agreed to Nangongja's request and let him transplant his brother's eyes? No matter what choice Fugaku made, Sasuke didn't think it was a good choice. After all, compared to himself, if Fugaku rejected Nangongja's proposal so straightforwardly, Sasuke really didn't know whether Nangongja would be angry with Fugaku because of such a thing. And if his father forced him to transplant Itachi's eyes, Sasuke's heart was very unwilling to accept it. Although with Nangongja's character, he wouldn't necessarily turn hostile because of Fugaku's rejection, but when it came to his family, presumably, few people could maintain their calm. But to Sasuke's surprise, his father, the former patriarch of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Fugaku, directly used his own actions to provide a second path for Sasuke and Nangongja. Uchiha Fugaku looked at Sasuke and Nangongja with a smile on his mouth and slowly said to Sasuke and Nangongja, "You two should take a look at this." While speaking, Fugaku's eyes also appeared in the representative Sharingan of the Uchiha clan, and this pair of eyes was the peak of the normal Sharingan, 3-tomo Sharingan. As the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, it was not surprising to have such a pair of eyes. After all, in the world of ninja, strategy and vision may be very important, but to become the patriarch of a powerful clan like the Uchiha clan, you also need to be powerful beyond most people. Chapter 547. Just when Sasuke and Nangongja couldn't figure out what Fugaku was going to do at this moment, the 3-tomo in Fugaku's eyes quickly rotated under the influence of chakra. The 3-tomo were rotating at a very high speed. Generally speaking, it was because the eyes were operating to the extreme. But in the same way, there was another situation that would make the 3-tomo rotate quickly. Manjikyu Sharingan's awakening. Although Nangongja and Sasuke weren't sure, a crazy idea was born in their hearts. The well-known three-tomo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan wasn't the end of the Sharingan's evolution path. Although this news wasn't known to everyone, as the clan leader of the Uchiha clan, how could Uchiha Fugaku not know? After decades of development in the Woodleaf clan, even if the Uchiha clan didn't have any talented and powerful geniuses, there would always be people who had such a transcendental Manjikyu Sharingan under the combination of time and place. Uchiha Fugaku, as the clan leader of the Uchiha clan, naturally should know about the records of Manjikyu Sharingan. And according to the character of Uchiha Fugaku when he was the clan leader of the Uchiha clan, since he knew the potential of Manjikyu Sharingan, even if he had to pay a high price, he would definitely master such a power in his own hands. In the bloody pupils, the three tomo were constantly rotating, and gradually there was a phenomenon of adhesion. 4 points and a slightly slender triangular pinwheel appeared in Fugaku's eyes. One of the 4 points was located in the center of the pupil, and the other 3 points were located at the place where the 3 tomo were before. Although it was a little cumbersome, the characteristics of Manjikyu Sharingan were undoubtedly revealed. Yes, this was Uchiha Fugaku's Manjikyu Sharingan, 4 points pinwheel Sharingan. Seeing the Manjikyu Sharingan in his father's eyes, Sasuke's eyes suddenly became round. His father was actually hiding such a powerful force? The more one has a Manjikyu Sharingan, the more one knows how terrifying it is. But why didn't his father show his strength to fight against Konoha when the Uchiha clan was destroyed? Why didn't his father show his strength to fight against Konoha's ninja village? Even if he couldn't, he could at least let the Uchiha clan survive. Such doubts appeared in Sasuke's mind, but Sasuke knew that his father would not say these words to him. After all, Uchiha Fugaku is no longer the ambitious man before, but a hermit who enjoys a plain life. Fugaku doesn't want such a dark past to leave a shadow in Sasuke's heart. I know that Head Nangong came to the Lion clan's different space to find Sasuke, and even made such a request that would obviously put Sasuke in a dilemma. It's not for any personal purpose. As the former leader of the Uchiha clan, I have a good eye for people. There must be something that forced Head Nangong to come here to seek power beyond Manjikyu Sharingan. Looking at Nangongja and Sasuke standing beside him, Fugaku's eyes flashed with a wisp of wisdom. As Fugaku himself said, during his time as the leader of the Uchiha clan, Fugaku has actually seen all kinds of people and is quite experienced in judging people. Nangongja is not a person obsessed with power and status, this is very obvious. But at this moment, Nangongja violated his own principles and came to the Lion clan's different space to make such a request to Sasuke. Obviously, he has been forced to the point of no choice. Sasuke is too kind, just like his brother. Fugaku looked at Sasuke with his eyes, and in a trance, he seemed to see Itachi Uchiha's figure appear beside Sasuke. When Itachi was forced by the group of people in Woodleaf village to slaughter his family, the expression on his face was the same as Sasuke's now. His heart was full of entanglement and a bit overwhelmed. Fugaku has seen such an expression once, and when he saw it last time, he secretly vowed in his heart that he would not let his family have such an expression on their faces again. Since you need a pair of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and Sasuke doesn't want to use his brother's eyes, it's better to use my eyes. Anyway, I have been living in the Lion clan's different space, and it's useless for this pair of eyes to follow me. It's better to let them follow Sasuke. It can solve the dilemma Sasuke is facing at the moment, and at the same time, it can let Head Nangong not be embarrassed by the dilemma in front of you. Isn't it killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Fugaku wants to give his eyes to Sasuke? Such a move was not expected by Sasuke and Nangongja at the same time. However, when Nangongja thought about it carefully, he realized that what Fugaku said actually had a certain degree of feasibility. But at this moment, Nangongja was unwilling to force Sasuke too much. After all, although he didn't have to put himself and Itachi on the scale, Sasuke needed to make a choice between his father and Itachi at the moment. Perhaps from Fugaku's point of view, such a solution is a good way, but can Sasuke really accept such a solution? Nangongja didn't know, and Sasuke didn't know at the moment. Because the moment Fugaku proposed to contribute his Manjikyu Sharingan, Sasuke's heart was already in a mess. His father, who has always valued interests more than his family in his eyes, has always maintained a cold-blooded face. At this moment, because of his difficulties, he wants to contribute his precious eyes? Sasuke's heart was already in a mess at the moment, and he couldn't make any judgment. Fugaku obviously also saw Sasuke's dilemma at the moment. Perhaps Sasuke couldn't see everything clearly because of his inexperience, but Fugaku, as the former patriarch of the Uchiha clan, is naturally better than Sasuke in judging the situation and identifying the general situation. Although his family is temporarily living in the Lion clan's different space, in fact, it can be said that they are completely under the protection of Nangongja. Imagine that without the support of the entire Uchiha clan, once Uchiha Fugaku's family and Yuri Koyuri set foot in the ninja world, they will be attacked by many people who covet the Sharingan. Although Nangongja may not necessarily do such a thing, Fugaku had to put his vision further and think in the most dangerous direction. Chapter 548. Sasuke's hesitation was naturally seen by Fugaku. So after showing a slightly apologetic look to Nangongja, Fugaku pulled Sasuke's arm and pulled him aside. Although Nangongja believed that he could clearly hear the conversation between the Uchiha father and son by injecting his internal force into his ears, Nangongja did not do so, because such a conversation was not what Nangongja wanted to hear. So Nangongja just used his own eyes to watch Fugaku standing opposite Sasuke. Fugaku's mouth kept opening and closing, and the expression in his eyes kept changing. After more than 10 minutes of persuasion, Sasuke finally nodded to Fugaku with difficulty. He held Sasuke's hand, just like when Sasuke taught him to walk step by step when he was a child. Nangong-sama, we have already agreed. My eyes will be handed over to Sasuke from now on. You can bring a doctor who can perform eye transplant to the Lion clan's different space at any time, or inform us to go to the Blood Cloak Pavilion headquarters for eye transplant surgery. Fugaku cupped his hands at Nangongja and said respectfully. Nangongja looked at Fugaku standing opposite him and Sasuke, whose eyes were wrapped in white gauze. For a moment, his heart was filled with guilt. Nangongja always felt that what he was doing now was really not in line with his principles. Forcing the Uchiha father and son like this was very difficult for Nangongja to accept. With complicated emotions, Nangongja took a deep look at Fugaku and Sasuke, then nodded and said to Fugaku and Sasuke, "This time, I am indeed a bit abrupt. Because of my own personal reasons, you have to suffer such a choice." For enemies, Nangongja naturally did not hesitate to use iron-blooded means, but for people like Sasuke, who had a good relationship with him, Nangongja still found it difficult to be ruthless. Nangong-sama, you don't have to be so concerned. There are many things in this world that we can't control. There are many things that we can't do just because we want to. I can understand your difficulties. Fugaku was different from Sasuke. As the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, Fugaku had done many things that went against his conscience out of helplessness. Now Nangongja was already a gentle person. If other people were in Nangongja's position, they would definitely be more ruthless than Nangongja, and not feel guilty like Nangongja was now. In that case, I'll take my leave. When I finish all the arrangements in the blood-robed pavilion, I will send someone to perform the eye transplant surgery for both of you. At this moment, Nangongja didn't know why he only wanted to leave Sasuke and Fugaku. At this moment, although Sasuke and Fugaku didn't say anything harsh, for Nangongja, their eyes were like sharp knives constantly stabbing into Nangongja's heart. This was the first time he did something against his conscience, and this feeling didn't make Nangongja feel comfortable. Nangongja left the Lion Clan space as if he was running away, while Sasuke and Fugaku stood in the courtyard of their home, silent for a long time. In the end, they could only end this situation after Fugaku sighed. At this moment, not only Nangongzhe and Uchiha's father and son were suffering, but a similar scene also appeared in Woodleaf Village. Because the Fourth Shinobi World War was about to break out, Watergate has been working hard to improve the strength of Woodleaf Village during this period of time, looking forward to making Woodleaf Village stand out in the coming battle and seize more benefits. At this moment, it was already late at night, even the streetlights on Woodleaf Street were extinguished because of the late night. She took out her keys and gently opened the door of her house. She tiptoed and took off her shoes. Then, she slowly hung her coat on the hanger. For some reason, a feeling of fatigue suddenly hit Watergate's heart. During this period of time, because of the Fourth Shinobi World War, Watergate almost returned to his home in the middle of the night. Although when he was in the Hokage's office, he dealt with all kinds of decisions that could affect the life and death of thousands of people, that feeling made Watergate very addicted. But when he returned home alone, when all the halos on his body faded away, the emptiness in Watergate's heart emerged uncontrollably. Is everything I'm doing right now right or wrong? Watergate didn't know what the answer was, because he was already riding a tiger and couldn't get off. Woodleaf, the war machine, was already operating because of the news of the Fourth Shinobi World War. Once the war machine Woodleaf was started, it would only stop after obtaining enough benefits. Sigh. Minato let out a long sigh and walked to his kitchen with an indescribable feeling. He opened the refrigerator door and took out a bottle of cold oolong tea. He took a few sips of the cold oolong tea and poured it into his mouth. Oyaji, can I talk to you about something? Just when Watergate's expression was still in a trance, suddenly the voice of his son Naruto suddenly appeared behind him. Did he completely let down his guard when he was at home? What was the reason for this? Was it because of physical exhaustion or mental exhaustion? Having no time to think about such a question, Watergate put down the oolong tea in his hand, trying to make his expression more gentle, and said to Naruto. It's already so late, but you haven't slept yet. It seems that you have been preparing to tell me what you are going to say for a long time. Since you have hesitated for so long and finally mustered up the courage to say it to me, then don't be so shy, just say it directly. My family's Naruto's ninja, isn't it straightforward? Looking at Naruto, Watergate gently pulled Naruto's hand, and took Naruto to the living room. He turned on a small night light that was not so bright. Watergate and Naruto's faces became much softer under the slightly orange light. Watergate sat quietly on the sofa, carefully looking at his son. Time really flies. When he first met Naruto, although Naruto didn't like him, he always looked so bright and positive. But as he grew older, although Naruto was still so bright, his eyebrows unconsciously became a bit heavier. Is this the price of growing up? Chapter 549. Finally, after struggling for a while, Naruto gritted his teeth and opened his eyes as if he had made a decision. He said to Minato, who was sitting opposite to him, I'm not going to give you a chance to fight me. Oyaji, I don't know if you still remember the scene when Pain's Rikudo attacked Woodleaf Village? When he heard Naruto suddenly talking about Pain's attack on Woodleaf Village, Watergate's expression suddenly became serious. For Watergate, although defeating Pain was very important, such a battle that caused heavy losses to Woodleaf Village was also a very disgraceful mark on Watergate's resume as Hokage. Watergate, who has always been the best Hokage in history as his goal, was actually very unwilling to accept such a disgraceful mark. But at this moment, Naruto was obviously immersed in his own emotions. He didn't notice what kind of expression Watergate had on his face. Although I know that I am not the most powerful person, I still think that I have some ability to protect myself. Indeed, although Naruto at the moment is not the strongest in Woodleaf Village, but Naruto is also comparable to an ordinary Jonin without using the power of Nine Tails mode. And once the power of Nine Tails sealed in his body is activated, then Naruto's combat power will definitely soar rapidly. But even so, when Naruto recalled the disastrous scene when Pain attacked Woodleaf Village, Naruto's heart was full of powerlessness. Even if he fully released the power of 9 tails that he can stimulate, and even if he desperately stimulated all the power of 9 tails, he doesn't seem to have the power to protect himself. As a ninja, he has a different kind of worship for power. When Naruto realized his weakness, the feeling of suffering in his heart was completely imaginable. When his mother took his hand and took him to the Shikatsu forest, when he passed by the ruins, he heard the sad and desperate cries of his neighbors, but he almost left without hesitation. Such a thing was something that Naruto thought he would never do, but such a thing was still done by himself. Because of the powerlessness, because of the guilt of ignoring the lives of others. I want to become stronger, I want to have the power to carry out my own ninja path. I want to be a person who protects others, not a person who is protected by others. What I want to be a warrior who can stand proudly on the battlefield, not a powerless person who is waiting for others to save him. Naruto's voice became more and more passionate, he even seemed to have forgotten that it was already late at night, and his mother had already stepped into the land of dreams. Now Naruto didn't want to care about anything, because Naruto had been tortured by his own emotions for a long time. Under the guidance of Watergate, Naruto was finally able to express all the emotions in his heart. This feeling made Naruto no longer want to think about anything meaningless. Looking at the child in front of him, who had already revealed some of Kyuubi's aura, and looking at the young man who was clenching his fist and hoping that he could become stronger, Minato's thoughts involuntarily returned to the time when he was also a young man. Was he like Naruto back then, tortured by the feeling of powerlessness that surged in his heart? Was he also affected by the same emotions at that time, and then tried all kinds of methods to make himself stronger without hesitation? But now, he was addicted to the desire for power and couldn't extricate himself for a long time. Initially, he simply wanted to expel the helplessness in his heart to grow stronger. However, he didn't know when it started to slowly decline. Naruto, looking at his own child, Minato said slowly, "Don't worry. We're not gods. We can't make everything go according to what we want. In many cases, the lack of manpower is the biggest obstacle that stands in our way. However, such an obstacle isn't something that can be overcome with willpower alone." Watergate's tone was full of heaviness, because what Watergate said now was the conclusion that Watergate came to during his continuous growth. After hearing Watergate's words, Naruto's eyes also became a little dim. Although Naruto wanted to refute, he couldn't find a reason to convince himself and Watergate. But seeing Naruto's dim eyes, Watergate suddenly changed the thread of discussion, and the heavy atmosphere was suddenly broken by Watergate. Even if there is a lack of manpower, so what? We have been training ourselves step by step from being weak to become strong. It's a good thing to be able to recognize your own weakness, because it's precisely because you can see your own weakness. Only by facing our own weakness can we have the opportunity to continue to grow. Hearing Watergate's words, Naruto's eyes finally lit up. Watergate was right. No one was born to be strong. All the strong gradually became strong step by step from being weak. Since I'm not strong enough now, I shouldn't run away, but face my own weakness. Yes, I'm weak. But I won't always be weak, because I'll do my best to make myself strong. Don't worry, Naruto, I'm very pleased that you can say such words to me. I've already seen your will. As your father, I can't just abandon you like this. I'll do my best to make you stronger. Sure enough, it's time to consider the suggestion made by the 4th Raikage AI during the 5 Kage tournament. In fact, it took time for a person to become strong. But as the goal of Akatsuki in the 4th Shinobi World War, Watergate hopes that Naruto can also have a certain degree of self-protection. And the means to make Naruto strong quickly has been hidden in Naruto's body. The head of the 9 tails, the strongest demon fox, 9 tails. If Naruto can fully master the power of the 9 tails in his body, then naturally it can make Naruto's strength advance by leaps and bounds. Just like the Hachibi column force of the Cloud Village, although his powerful lightning taijutsu is very eye-catching, but what really makes him a strong person is that he can perfectly control the power of the Hachibi in his body. Chapter 550. After the end of the main agenda of the 5 Kages tournament, as the 4th Raikage, I secretly invited the 4th Hokage, Watergate, for a secret meeting. As the initiator of the 5 Kages tournament, the 4th Raikage naturally wouldn't propose such a proposal to unite the 5 great shinobi villages without knowing anything about the Akatsuki. But it was precisely after understanding the situation of the Akatsuki that I became more afraid of them. In the early days, the Akatsuki was still okay, it was just an organization with some power in the Rain country. But after experiencing a low point, that is, after being annihilated by the Rain country's leader, demigod, Hanzo the Salamander, the Akatsuki became different. The Akatsuki that was originally open and aboveboard, suddenly began to turn into a half-light and half-dark organization, and in the end, even directly became an organization lurking in the dark. The purpose of the Akatsuki was to provide shelter for the weak, although it was a bit too idealistic, but it was full of the glory of humanity. But after they sneaked into the darkness, all their actions that carried the brilliance of humanity and ideals disappeared. The Akatsuki seemed to have become an organization in the blink of an eye, and no matter what kind of task, as long as it can collect money, the Akatsuki was willing to accept it. And from the outside, it seems that the Akatsuki also became strong by virtue of the change in style. But whether it was AI or Watergate, as the leader of a super force, they could see that the Akatsuki definitely didn't rely on such means to rise. Thinking about the strong people who joined the Akatsuki in the past, how could they be won over just by relying on money? Well, except for the big money fan of Kakuzu. The remaining people of the Akatsuki were all unruly existences, there was nothing that could really attract them, so why should they risk their lives for the Akatsuki? And how many years has it been since the Akatsuki was established? A lot of things can't be saved by just relying on money. So for the sudden appearance of Uchiha Obito in the 5 Kages tournament, although most people don't believe that he is really Uchiha Madara, but he must have a close relationship with Uchiha Madara. An organization that inherited the legacy of Uchiha Madara sounded like it could barely make a name for itself. Uchiha Madara was once called Ajura. Even if it's just his legacy, it's not so easy to deal with. Therefore, in order to let the ninja allied forces accumulate more power, A went to Namikaze Watergate. Because in the hands of Woodleaf, there was a powerful existence that no one could ignore, the Nine-Tails Fox Column Force, who was also the child of the 4th Hokage Wave Watergate, Uzumaki Naruto. The fact that Naruto is Column Force is actually not a completely undetectable news. As long as the time of Naruto's birth, the time when the Nine-Tails attacked Woodleaf, the physical characteristics of Naruto, and the few things that can be collected about Naruto's performance during missions in the ninja world, it's easy to judge the identity of Naruto. So a timely proposed to Watergate to let his younger brother Killer Bee take Watergate's son Naruto to train to control the tailed beasts in his body. If Naruto can perfectly control the tailed beasts in his body, it will indeed be a supplement to the high-end combat power of the ninja allied forces. More importantly, such an act can let us show enough goodwill to Watergate. After all, I have already asked my brother to take your son to train together. Woodleaf's mastery of the Nine-Tails is not so good for the Cloud Village, and there is even a risk of making Woodleaf stronger. I'm already willing to take such a huge risk to make your son stronger, to let your son have the ability to protect himself and even become an important force in the war. Even if you don't want to be loyal to me, you should at least have a closer relationship with me, right? After all, the ninja allied forces is the union of the 5 great ninja villages. There are too many interests involved. Even the arrogant 4th Raikage has to find an ally who can make him feel assured enough to advance and retreat with him. The other 3 ninja villages may also start to draw each other at this time, so that they can get enough power to speak in the ninja allied forces. Originally, Watergate didn't want to let Naruto and Killer Bee go to the Holy Land in the Land of Lightning to control the tailed beasts in his body. After all, there is also a descendant of the Uzumaki clan who is extremely good at taming tailed beasts in Woodleaf, his wife, Naruto's mother, Uzumaki Shinakushina. However, the Uzumaki clan's way of taming the tailed beasts is actually more similar to applying a lot of sealing techniques, so taming the tailed beasts is still not as fast as the Raikage proposal for him. But after seeing Naruto's performance and mood at the moment, Watergate knew that such a trip to the Land of Lightning was actually inevitable. After hearing his father's promise to become stronger, Naruto's eyes also burned with flames. Naruto, I do have a way to make you stronger quickly. But such a thing as quickly becoming stronger contains a huge risk. Originally, I didn't intend to let you become stronger in this way, but now that I see the strong desire in your heart, I think I should tell you. Looking at Naruto, Watergate said with a slightly serious tone, you know that the absolute king of the tailed beasts is sealed in your body, the 9 tails. With the teaching of your mother and the help of Jiraiya-sensei, you have been able to control part of the power of the 9 tails in your body. This power can make you strong in an instant, but it also has the danger of losing control. After all, most of the tailed beasts are arrogant and unruly. They won't let you use their power so easily. I believe you have a deep understanding of this. Listening to Watergate's words, Naruto also nodded in agreement. When he was on the bridge of heaven and earth, the tailed beast in his body went berserk and made a big mess. If it wasn't stopped in time, perhaps he would have already lost his self-consciousness and become a killing machine, or even die because of it. But the tailed beasts are not really uncontrollable. In the Kumo Shinobu village, there is a person who can perfectly control the tailed beast in his body, Column Force, and Yondaime Raikage also proposed to me to let the Hachibi Column Force teach you how to use the power of the tailed beast in your body. This is your opportunity to become stronger. Chapter 551. Naruto and Watergate talked for a long time all night. It wasn't until the east of the sky outside the window that Watergate finally let Naruto go back to rest. Watergate didn't expect that he would become so talkative and long-winded when it came to his family. For the whole night, except for the first 1 or 2 hours, Watergate talked about some practical things about cultivation. In the end, it all turned into reminding Naruto to pay attention to his safety. Watching Naruto covering his mouth and yawning as he walked towards his room, Kuroto couldn't help but smile. Watergate looked at the time and found that there was still some time to rest, so he walked slowly to his room upstairs. Stepping up the stairs step by step, Watergate came to the door of his room, but saw that the door of the room was not closed. Instead, it was ajar. Watergate's mouth flashed a smile. He gently pushed open the door of the room and walked into the room. At this moment, Shinakushina seemed to be sleeping. She covered herself with a quilt. Her breathing seemed to be even, as if she had really fallen into a dream. With a smile, Watergate slowly walked to Shinakushina's side. He put his mouth next to Shinakushina's ear and said softly, "Okay, stop pretending. Naruto, that silly child, can't find you, but how can I not find you? You have been lying in the corner listening to us for a long time. I think you should have heard everything, right?" Shinakushina obviously knew that she couldn't fool Watergate by pretending to be asleep, so she directly lifted the quilt covering her body and looked directly at Watergate. Perhaps because of pretending to be asleep just now, Shinakushina's hair was slightly messy, but what was more eye-catching was Shinakushina's red and swollen eyes at the moment. In this world, no mother wants to put her child in danger. Every mother is willing to be fearless in order to protect their child's safety. A woman is weak, but a mother is strong. Shinakushina agreed with Watergate's words to Naruto about sending him to Kumo Shinobu village to control tailed beasts. But how can it be so easy to control a tailed beast? In the face of the rebellious tailed beast, even the Uzumaki clan relied on their special body and superb sealing ability to tame the tailed beast step by step. So far, only a handful of people have been able to perfectly control the Kyubi. The most recent person who was able to do so was Uchiha Obito, the masked man who forcibly controlled the Kyubi with his Manjikyu Sharingan when the Kyubi invaded Konoha more than 10 years ago. From this, it can be seen that the conditions to control a tailed beast are extremely harsh. Whether Naruto can control the 9 tails in his body or not, no one can give a clear answer. But seeing the excited expression on Naruto's face, Shina Kushina, who wanted to go out and scold Watergate again and make Watergate give up such a dangerous plan, could only resist the urge to rush forward again and again. Can't we change the way? I can teach Naruto more exquisite sealing techniques, you can also teach Naruto more wind release ninjutsu. These are all ways to make Naruto stronger. Do we have to let Naruto become stronger in such a dangerous way? Shina Kushina looked at Watergate, her eyes were filled with tears again. At this moment, Shina Kushina didn't have the spirit of blood red pepper. In the past, she was simply a weak woman. Watergate didn't explain to Shina Kushina the necessity of Naruto going to Kumo Shinobu village to practice, because Watergate knew that Shina Kushina already knew these things, so there was no need for him to explain so much. Watergate just slowly sat beside Shina Kushina and hugged Shina Kushina into his arms. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked Shina Kushina's soft red hair, trying to calm Shina Kushina down. Shina Kushina. You are Naruto's mother, and I am also Naruto's father. If I had a choice, I would definitely want my child to live a stable and peaceful life, and I don't even want him to become a ninja. But we don't have a choice. When we were born into this world, we had no choice. We have to train Naruto to be a killing ninja, because only by killing can he not be killed by others. Watergate finally spoke, but he didn't have the usual passionate and generous tone. Instead, it was full of helplessness. Now the Akatsuki has declared war on the entire ninja world, and their goal is very clear, that is, Column Force, who has the 9 tails. Naruto is their goal, and in order to extract the 9 tails from Naruto's body, they will only use all kinds of means to attack Naruto. We can indeed protect Naruto for a while, but we can't protect Naruto for a lifetime. Temporary stability and long-term stability, we have to make a choice between them. Speaking of this, Watergate's eyes flashed with a trace of firmness. Accepting the trial is indeed a dangerous thing, but such danger can give Naruto the opportunity to protect himself. Whether it is a young eagle or a sparrow, they must learn to fly with their wings. As parents, what we have to do is not only to give our children enough protection, but more importantly, learn to let go of our hands, so that they can live in this world stronger. Shina Kushina listened to Watergate's words, but felt that Watergate's tone was obviously a bit wrong. Raising her head to look at Watergate, Shina Kushina found that Watergate, who was usually very strong, also had red eyes at this moment. When he saw Shina Kushina looking at him, Watergate blinked, trying to force back the tears in his eyes, but instead, a drop of tear was squeezed out of his eye. The warm and even scalding tears dripped on Shina Kushina's face, making Shina Kushina completely understand the entanglement and reluctance in Watergate's heart at this moment. Gently wrapping her arms around Watergate's waist, Shina Kushina fell into Watergate's arms, listening to Watergate's heartbeat. That's right, after all, the two of them couldn't protect Naruto for a lifetime, so they had to let go in the end. Although Minato and Kushina were very reluctant to let go, Minato and Kushina were very reluctant. Chapter 552. In the Blood Cloth Pavilion, a high platform had been set up in the huge square that was used for morning and evening practice. The high platform was divided into 2 levels. The first level was composed of the 5 colors representing the 5 elements: black, green, red, yellow, and white. In the middle of each color, there was a hollowed-out chair carved with the pattern of the 5 elements. Obviously, this was the seat prepared for the 5 altar masters of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. On this level of the 5-colored high platform, there was a blood-colored platform that looked like it was watered with blood. Unlike the complicated decorations on the chairs of the Five Elements Altar's altar masters, this seat at the highest level looked a little too ordinary. There were no hollowed-out decorations, nor was there any huge specifications. It was just a very simple chair. However, such a simple and plain chair wasn't as simple as it looked. The chair's dark red surface and the dragon-shaped patterns entwined around it gave the chair a dignified feeling. Next to the chair, a short square table made of the same material was placed. A shelf that was obviously used to hold a long sword was placed on the table. At this moment, the blood cloth pavilion had become a little noisier than before. After all, Nangongzhe had ordered all the outside forces of the blood cloth pavilion to return and prepare for war. And Mashiro naturally carried out Nangongzhe's orders faithfully. In the middle of the blood robe pavilion, which was large enough to accommodate at least 1,000 people, the people standing in the square weren't ordinary disciples of the blood robe pavilion, but the backbone of the blood robe pavilion. Each of them had the strength of a chunin or even an elite chunin or above. Although there were many people, there wasn't much noise. Sometimes, the sound of nearly 1,000 people in the square couldn't even be compared to the occasional chirping of birds and insects from the surrounding forest. However, silence didn't mean silence. Now, everyone standing in the square had bright eyes at this moment. Many of them even exuded a dangerous aura. The words that Nangongzhe asked Mashiro to pass on to all the disciples of the blood cloth pavilion were naturally heard by these people. Originally, when the blood garment pavilion existed as a hidden force, because it was isolated from the world, it did not have much desire for profit or fame. However, because of Nangongzhe's ascension to the throne, everything changed dramatically. Nangongzhe needs to rely on the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to protect his family, which is very important to him. The Blood Cloak Pavilion also relies on Nangongzhe's understanding of the shinobi world and Nangongzhe's own strength to gradually change from a hidden force to a powerful force second only to the 5 great shinobi villages. Due to the rise in their status and the benefits that were constantly falling into their lap, it was clear that the Blood Garment Pavilion, from top to bottom, had become more ambitious. That feeling was like a ferocious beast that had always been eating vegetables was suddenly fed a piece of fresh and juicy meat. The desire for meat that came from the bottom of his heart was enough to overcome all difficulties and obstacles. These were the so-called ferocious beasts, which were also the so-called humans. Finally, after a long wait, the 5 altar lords of the 5 elements altar came out wearing large robes that represented the colors of their respective 5 elements. Aoki, Akatsuki, Hutu, and Bishui were the original altar lords of the 5 elements altar, and the one who replaced the rebel sharp metal was Mashiro, who has been following Nangongzhe. However, all of this didn't cause any waves. For the disciples of the other 4 5 elements altar, it didn't matter who the altar lord of the sharp metal altar was. For the disciples of the sharp metal altar, after their original altar lord rebelled, they were directly under the leadership of Nangongzhe, the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. In most cases, Nangongzhe was not so keen on attending some of the meetings of his own forces, so Mashiro presided over the meetings for Nangongzhe. Everyone had witnessed Mashiro's ability. Today's meeting required the altar lords of the 5 elements altar to be present, but Nangongzhe was the head and an altar lord. In order to let everyone understand that the 5 elements altar was on the same level as him, Nangongzhe couldn't directly give the title of Sharp Metal Altar Lord to himself. Therefore, he gave Mashiro the right to represent the Sharp Metal Altar in the meeting. After the 5 altar lords appeared, they did not immediately take their seats. Instead, they all stood at the front of the high platform. The 5 of them stood in a row and looked at the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion standing in front of them. Aoki was the most senior among the 5 altar lords of the 5 elements altar, so he stood in the middle and also in the front of the 5. Looking around at the many core disciples standing in front of him, Aoki's eyes were full of emotion. Although he was an old man, Aoki wasn't the kind of stubborn old man who didn't know how to adapt. In the past, the Blood Cloak Pavilion had always stayed out of things and didn't participate in anything in the ninja world. They just lived in the mountains by themselves. This kind of existence couldn't be said to be bad. After all, this kind of existence allowed them to live in a very stable environment for development. But is stability really a good thing? No matter how long a force without tension or oppression could struggle at death's door, it would eventually be drowned in the torrent of history. Looking at the current Blood Cloak Pavilion under the leadership of Nangongzhi, its scope of influence has almost expanded to the entire ninja world, becoming the first force under the 5 great ninja villages. More importantly, after Nangongzhi took over, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion became more energetic. Many of the disciples who were originally idling around had unknowingly undergone a change. Just like the nearly 1,000 disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion standing in front of him now, who were comparable to Chunin and even elite Jonin. In fact, more than half of them stood out after Nangongzhi took the position. Many of the Blood Garment Pavilion's disciples no longer addressed Nangongzhi as head of the throne, or king of hell, in terms of fame. Instead, they addressed him as Lord of Resurgence, from the depths of their hearts. Slightly clearing his throat, Aoki slammed his crutch on the high platform and said to everyone, "Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a chance. Welcome, Lord." Chapter 553. After hearing Qing Mu's old but powerful voice, every disciple of the Blood Cloth Pavilion became excited. After all, Nangongzhi's reputation among the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion was so high that no one could reach it. Perhaps there was a certain degree of estrangement between the 5-element altars of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, but as long as Nangongzhi gave any order, the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion would wholeheartedly unite to carry out Nangongzhi's order. "Welcome, Chief. Welcome, Chief. Welcome, Chief." Under Qing Mu's lead, all the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion standing in the square began to cheer. The voices of nearly 1,000 people, which were supported by internal strength, radiated in all directions like a tsunami. The disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion half-knelt toward Nangongzhi's position on the high platform. Qing Mu and the other 4 5-element altar masters also bowed toward Nangongzhi's position. Amidst the cheers, Nangongzhi's figure finally appeared slowly. Unlike usual, Nangongzhi did not wear the loose black and red robe that he usually liked to wear. Instead, he wore the white robe that represented the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Nangongzhi wore the white silk robe with fine veins and a large part of it was stained with blood. Nangongzhi was like a banished immortal who had fallen from the heavens into the mortal world. He did not have the slightest bit of mortal aura, as if he was incompatible with the world but had unexpectedly appeared in this world. Nangongzhi held his black calamity sword and slowly floated down from the sky. Nangongzhi's body didn't emit any powerful aura at this moment. He was just like a feather that was being blown by the wind. A feather dyed in blood slowly fell from the sky. Standing in front of his position, Nangongzhi slowly shook the hem of his robe as if he was flicking off some dust on it. Then, he casually sat down. Nangongzhi casually tossed his Heaven's Calamity sword into the air and released a few strands of internal energy from his fingertips. The internal energy hit the hilt of the Heaven's Calamity sword and adjusted its position in the air. When all of the internal energy hit the Heaven's Calamity sword, the Heaven's Calamity sword landed firmly on the sword rack on the short table beside the chair. After doing all this, Nangongzhi finally slowly raised his head and looked at the many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion standing in the square. "Get up," Nangongzhi's voice was not loud. It even sounded like a whisper. When Nangongzhi spoke, he did not use internal strength to support his voice. However, his voice was able to drown out the cheers of nearly 1,000 people in the square. Everyone could feel the vibrations in their vocal cords, and they were very sure that they were shouting with all their might. However, the strange thing was that the world returned to silence at this moment. Other than Nangongzhi's murmurs, all other sounds seemed to have been erased. The people gathered here were all cultivators of internal strength. Of course, they did not think that such a miraculous scene was a coincidence. The 5 altar lords of the 5 elements altar, who were also standing on the high platform, naturally understood the reason for such a situation at this moment. Force was a powerful force that an internal force cultivator would obtain when they succeeded in their cultivation. In the process of battle, once an internal force cultivator used the force they comprehended, they would be able to greatly increase their own strength. On the other hand, those who stood on the opposite side of the internal force cultivator would be greatly suppressed. It could be said that potential was an important means that internal strength cultivators could use to resist the endless stream of strange ninjutsu. However, potential was not the end. On the contrary, potential was a step to a more powerful stage. When an internal strength cultivator who had potential understood his own heart and his cultivation reached a certain level, he would have a more powerful force, domain. There was a saying that went like this: the land under the heavens was the king's land, and the land under the heavens was the king's vassal. Domain was the ability to turn a certain area into a space that one could completely control. One would be able to make all things in this space obey. At this moment, Nangongzhe was using the legendary domain that was above potential. Moreover, it covered an area of nearly 650 square meters. At this moment, Nangongzhe was showing his muscles, and he was using the most simple and direct method. I am your leader, and I have the power to protect you. Although we are about to face a very difficult battle, and we may face many dangers. Some of us may even be seriously injured or even lose our lives. But you only need to know that your leader is strong. He is strong enough to lead you to the final victory. All of your sacrifices will not be in vain. You will appear in front of the world as a victor. The 5 sanctum leaders of the 5 elemental sanctum who were standing closest to Nangongzhe could feel how powerful the domain that Nangongzhe released was. They, who were proficient in tactics, naturally understood Nangongzhe's intention the best. Mashiro, who was dressed in a white robe with golden patterns, was also looking at Nangongzhe, who was sitting on the high platform with a face full of admiration. The gentle Nangongzhe at home was the Nangongzhe that Mashiro liked. However, the current Nangongzhe, who was filled with an invincible aura and stood at the peak of everything, was more like the Nangongzhe that he first met. Nangongzhe seemed to feel that it was about time. He immediately retracted the domain that he used to suppress the voices of others and show off his muscles. In fact, it was quite stressful for Nangongzhe to use the domain on such a large scale. The fact that Nangongzhe was able to maintain it for so long was the result of him trying his best. After retracting the domain, Nangongzhe's hand, which had been resting on the chair, twitched slightly. However, in order to let the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion be confident in the upcoming battle, Nangongzhe felt that no matter what price they had to pay, they should be filled with confidence. Chapter 554. While the 5 great shinobi villages were actively preparing for war, and Nangongzhe of the Blood Cloak Pavilion was ambitious, the Akatsuki in the Rain Village naturally didn't stay idle. Uchiha Obito, who had changed his makeup, was holding Uchiha round fan in his hand, sitting on a huge black stone chair. Obito's 3 Tomo Sharingan and Rinnegan were casually staring at the vast space in front of him, while the huge Geto-Mazo appeared behind him. 7 of the 9 eyes on the Geto-Mazo's face were completely open at this moment, and the remaining 2 eyes were half open, and the other one was tightly closed. Is everything ready? Obito looked at Black Zetsu standing beside him and asked slowly. At this moment, Obito's voice became low under Obito's intentional control, and it seemed to have an unexpected sense of majesty. Black Zetsu, who was standing beside Obito, was slightly surprised. If he didn't know that the one sitting beside him was Uchiha Obito, he would have faintly felt that Uchiha Madara was reborn in his heart. Uchiha Obito, really a person good at hiding and disguising. Although he was slightly surprised in his heart, Black Zetsu didn't show such a surprise. Black Zetsu nodded to Obito with an expressionless face, then he stretched out his hands in front of his body. He slowly opened his clenched fists, then slowly pushed his palms upwards. Almost at the same time when Black Zetsu pushed his hands up, a figure that was very similar to White Zetsu slowly emerged from the ground. White Zetsu appeared one after another, one after another. After more than 10 minutes, this kind of appearance didn't stop. Obito seemed to be a little tired, and his eyes turned to Kabuto, who was standing on the other side of him, wearing a large snake-patterned robe. As if he felt Obito's gaze, Kabuto also turned to look at Obito. He gently pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and a strange smile appeared on his face as he said to Obito, "Please rest assured, during this period of time, with the help of Akatsuki, I have found enough DNA of the deceased people. Now, I am fully prepared, although I can't guarantee that I can fully exert the strength of these deceased people when they were alive, but 70% to 80% of their peak strength is not a problem." At the same time. Saying this, Yakushi glanced at Black Zetsu, who was standing opposite him. Yakushi then said to Obito with a hint of mischievousness, "I have done my best during this period of time to increase the strength of the deceased people we can grasp to 95% of their peak strength. After all, the Vajura, who made the whole ninja world tremble once again made everyone tremble under his power. The strongest person who had already passed away." Although Kabuto deliberately used such a slightly euphemistic tone, almost ridiculing Obito, but in fact, he was talking to Black Zetsu, but Black Zetsu was completely unmoved, and didn't have the feeling of losing control of his emotions when he saw Uchiha Madara resurrected by Edo Tensei. After seeing the reaction of Black Zetsu and Kabuto, the corners of Obito's mouth, which was hidden under his mask, curled up slightly. It seems that the effort he spent on Black Zetsu was not in vain. For Black Zetsu, although Uchiha Madara was still worthy of respect, but he was no longer willing to sacrifice everything for Uchiha Madara. Looking at Kabuto, at this moment, Kabuto's attitude of wanting to show his value in various ways made Obito very happy. Because people who want to show their value through various actions are often people who lack self-confidence in their own heart. For Kabuto's past, Obito didn't dare to say that he was clear about it, but he was clear about 50% to 60% of it. A person who is extremely eager to find his true self, as long as such a person wants to, there are many ways to control him. The entire White Zetsu Legion has the strength of a Chunin, such a number advantage is enough to crush any ninja village. In terms of high-end strength, Kabuto's Edo Tensei was able to summon countless powerful ninjas who had already passed away. The improved Edo Tensei can exert the strength of the reincarnated person to a greater extent. The current Akatsuki, to be honest, is not afraid of the ninja coalition of the 5 great ninja villages. Fight! 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 Defeat the ninja coalition formed by the 5 great ninja villages. Pull the Hachibi and 9 tails out of Column Force's body. Completely resurrect the Jubi. Let himself become the Jubi's Column Force and carry out the Eye of the Moon plan. Let himself see the smile of the girl he missed again, let himself be able to return to the simple and pure life he has been away from for a long time. Rin, I miss you so much. A trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, and Obito slowly closed his eyes again. The tears in his eyes, and the sour feeling slowly appeared on the tip of his nose. Obito almost tried his best to suppress such feelings. When Uchiha Obito opened his eyes again, there was no trace of confusion and sadness in his eyes, only determination. All the confusion and sadness are temporary, because as long as he can really carry out the Eye of the Moon plan, then he can regain everything he wants. And if the Eye of the Moon plan fails, he will just die. In that case, it is better to put all the doubts and confusion in his heart behind him and fight with all his strength. Get ready, we will launch the attack in 3 days. Obito looked at the 100,000 White Zetsu standing in front of him, and then looked at Black Zetsu and Kabuto standing beside him, and said slowly, although we already have a powerful force that can compete with the 5 great ninja villages, and even in terms of high-end combat power, we still have countless people who have passed away and are not afraid of death. But we can't take it lightly. What we want is not a big battle, but a real victory in the war. In order to win, no matter how dirty the means are, you too will spare no effort to use it. Chapter 555. Obito silently calculated the power in his hands, 100,000 white zetsu with strength comparable to a chunin, and dozens of dead people summoned by Jura's Edo Tensei. Needless to say, 100,000 white zetsu is the power used to fight against a large number of ninjas from the 5 great ninja villages. The powerhouses summoned by the Edo Tensei are the most important. After all, in the world of ninjas, although the number advantage is very important, when an individual's strength has exceeded the limit, it's not impossible for a single person to directly affect a war. Where is Kisame? Suddenly, Obito asked Black Zetsu, who was standing beside him. Kisame is also a strong person that Uchiha Obito personally pulled into the Akatsuki. That kind of aggressive thinking and empty heart is the easiest sharp knife for Obito to control. And the fact is indeed so. Kisame has indeed done a good job over the years. The tasks given by him are basically completed very seriously. Even Itachi Uchiha, a bomb that can go out of control at any time, is monitored by Kisame, which is not bad. After hearing Obito's question, Black Zetsu, who was standing beside Uchiha Obito, immediately turned around and said to Obito, Kisame committed suicide because he failed the mission. Mission failed? Suicide? After hearing Black Zetsu's report, Obito's eyes were suddenly filled with a bit of astonishment. Kisame is not the kind of boring ninja with a fragile heart who can't accept his failure. On the contrary, because of Kisame's relatively strong nerves, his mental toughness is even stronger than most ninjas. Suddenly hearing these two words that had almost nothing to do with Kisame, Obito's brows, which were hidden under the mask, slowly knitted into a frown. Previously, we have been monitoring the people of Woodleaf Village and Cloud Village. By chance, we found that Uzumaki Naruto, who is the Nine Tails Column Force, and Killer Bee, who is the Hachibi Column Force, suddenly disappeared in their village. Because our main goal of this war is to capture the Hachibi and Nine Tails, I directly sent a part of White Zetsu to search and analyze the last place where the Nine Tails Column Force and the Hachibi Column Force appeared. Black Zetsu looked at Obito, and without the slightest concealment, he directly told all his arrangements to Obito. Under the effect of White Zetsu's detection ability, we quickly found that the Nine Tails Column Force of Woodleaf Village, Uzumaki Naruto, and the Hachibi Column Force of Cloud Village, Killer Bee, were in contact with each other, and they seemed to be rushing in a certain direction. In order to avoid any trouble, under my instructions, White Zetsu summoned the closest member of our Akatsuki organization to the location, that is, Kisame. Although Black Zetsu seemed to be unexpectedly honest at the moment, Obito's heart involuntarily began to have a kind of vigilance against Black Zetsu. Did his bewitchment these days not play its proper role? Black Zetsu's current behavior doesn't seem to be completely obedient to him. On the contrary, it's more like he wants to eliminate the power that he can control. Once suspicion began to appear in his heart, Obito's heart became sensitive. Such a war seems to rely too much on Black Zetsu's help, and the 100,000 White Zetsu army, such a force that can't be ignored, is firmly in the hands of Black Zetsu. And after Black Zetsu stole the Rinnegan from Woodleaf Village, he just used a reason to fool Obito, saying that he didn't find the second Rinnegan. For such a reason, although Obito didn't say anything, but obviously he didn't believe him. Obito thought that he could make Black Zetsu submit, and all kinds of performance during this time also made Obito feel that Black Zetsu had slowly fallen into his control. But at this moment, he didn't know why, but Obito felt that Black Zetsu's heart not only didn't become clear to him, but also became more vague as if it was shrouded in smoke. After a battle, Kisame was seriously injured because he couldn't defeat the Hachibi Column Force, Killer Bee, and the fourth Raikage AI, who came later to support him, and for some reason, he directly used the shark muscle to commit suicide. The shark muscle itself has the characteristics of killing its master, so it directly swallowed Kisame, who had lost his life. And the shark muscle also became the trophy of the Hachibi column force, Killer Bee, who carried it with him. That's all the information I can get. After hearing that Kisame committed suicide and was swallowed by the shark muscle, Obito's frown loosened. The relationship between the shark muscle and the ghost shark couldn't be explained in a few words. Although it seemed that the ghost shark had indeed lost its life and even its body, it wouldn't end so easily. Translator, Law Editor, Hitesh _ although the ghost shark had indeed lost its life and even its body, it wouldn't end so easily. So that's how it is. After listening to Black Zetsu's words, Obito also slowly nodded, and said a few understated words, as if he didn't care about the death of Kisame. However, the fact that Yondaime Raikage and Hachibi Jinchuriki were able to work together to kill Kisame is still worthy of our vigilance. The shinobi allied forces formed by the 5 great shinobi villages are not easy to deal with. We also need to have more capital in the limited time to defeat them. Black Zetsu looked at Obito, and his eyes became obscure, making people unable to figure out what he was thinking in his heart. Baguette, who was standing at the side, slowly walked a few steps towards the huge stone chair that Obito was sitting on, as if he wanted to show off his skills. Baguette said to Obito with a look of confidence, "Let's see if there's anything you can do. You don't have to worry, I have already made arrangements to enhance our strength." With that said, Kabuto's hand also began to make hand seals. Summoning Jutsu. Kabuto pressed his hand on the ground, and a summoning circle was completed in an instant. A relatively huge python revealed its figure from the smoke. This snake looks far larger than normal, but strangely, there is a strange bulge in the belly of this snake. Under the control of Medicine Master's pocket, this huge snake opened its mouth, and spat out the obviously oversized object in its body as if it was vomiting. Soon, a white giant egg stained with mucus that seems to have a somewhat wooden feeling appeared in front of them. Although he couldn't immediately figure out what this white wooden egg was, a familiar aura was emitted from it. The ones who perceive it most clearly are Uchiha, Obito, and Black Zetsu. A part of their body was cultivated with the cells of the Woodleaf First Hokage Senju Takuma, so the aura of this white egg is very familiar to them. Because this white egg exudes the aura of the legendary god of shinobi, Senju Takuma. Chapter 556. In fact, there are only a few things in the ninja world that can be related to Senju Takuma's aura, such as the 100,000 White Zetsu army clone from Senju Takuma's genes. Black Zetsu shared the same body with White Zetsu, Uchiha Obito whose body was filled with Hashirama's clone cells, Yamato who was born from Orochimaru's research, and Shimura Danzo who was already dead. No matter how he thought about it, the main body of the wooden egg was still as clear as day. Yamato? Black Zetsu looked at the huge wooden egg and murmured slightly. Kabuto, of course, also heard Black Zetsu's murmur, and with a little pride, he said to Obito and Black Zetsu, "There are actually many ways to make the power in our hands stronger. For example, we can search for the DNA of more deceased people to carry out the Edo Tensei. We can also use various experimental methods to allow the experts who are reincarnated from the Edo Tensei to display more of their strength when they were alive. But the simplest and fastest way is naturally to strengthen the 100,000 White Zetsu army." Kabuto adjusted the round-rimmed glasses on his nose, and said to Obito and Black Zetsu, "The White Zetsu army was originally created with Senju Takuma's cells and the power of the Gedomazo, but the cells used to create the White Zetsu have also declined due to time, so the power of the various Mokuton ninjutsu used by the White Zetsu isn't that great." After saying that, Kabuto slowly walked to the side of the wooden egg. Regardless of the sticky body fluid attached to the wooden egg, Kabuto looked at it as if he was admiring a beautiful work of art, and there was a look of obsession in his eyes. But Yamato is different. He withstood the erosion of Senju Takuma's cells, and he really absorbed the Senju Takuma's cells in his body without any rejection. Although there was no way to exert the power of Mokuton to the extreme, it has to be said that the Senju Takuma cells in his body were actually activated to a certain extent. If we can extract the Senju Takuma's cells from his body, and use the Geto Golem to modify the White Zetsu army, we will have a huge increase in power. The army of 100,000 White Zetsu originally had the strength of a Chunin. After such strengthening and transformation, although there may be individual differences, most of them will obtain the strength of a Chunin. If we have 100,000. No, even if we only have 50,000 or even 40,000 elite Chunin-level army, the ninja allied forces formed by the 5 great ninja villages will definitely be at an extremely obvious disadvantage in terms of basic strength. Hearing Medicine Master Bag's words, whether it was the expressionless Black Zetsu or Uchiha Obito, both of them were slightly moved. Although the two of them didn't know exactly how Medicine Master's pocket was going to change the 100,000 White Zetsu army, Medicine Master's pocket's description made it seem feasible. Then I'll leave everything to you. Taking a deep look at Medicine Master Bag, Uchiha Obito said slowly. Black Zetsu, who was standing beside Obito, also slowly walked to the side of the wooden egg and pressed his hand on it. A very pure Mokuton chakra was slowly transmitted from Black Zetsu's body to the wooden egg, and the wooden egg began to move a little under the stimulation of Mokuton chakra. This wooden egg was originally Yamato's ultimate means to protect himself, but in the end, it was still something made by using Mokuton chakra. At this moment, Black Zetsu used Mokuton chakra, which is almost the same as Yamato's, to forcibly invade the wooden egg and seize control of Yamato, who had lost his consciousness and was hiding in the wooden egg. As Black Zetsu's chakra continued to increase, the wooden egg, which was a little bit pale, became lively at this moment. The white wooden egg began to slowly be stained with a bit of green luster, and even a few tender green sprouts sprang out in some places. Finally, when Black Zetsu's chakra infusion reached a limit, the wooden egg that had been wrapped around Yamato's body finally couldn't withstand the huge power coming from inside. Like a ripe capsule, it directly burst open, and vines spread directly from the center of the wooden egg. In the center of the spreading vines, Yamato, who had lost consciousness but had no obvious injuries on his body, was lying in the center of the vines. Black Zetsu's powerful Mokuton power directly made Uchiha Obito sitting on the stone chair and Medicine Master Bag slightly surprised. Black Zetsu was really hiding something. But Black Zetsu didn't seem to feel that what he just did was strange. He directly grabbed Yamato's arm, and dragged the unconscious Yamato in the direction of Medicine Master Bag. I'll leave it to you. Looking at Medicine Master Bag, Black Zetsu directly threw Yamato in the direction of Medicine Master Bag. Looking at Yamato who was flying towards him, a huge white snake suddenly came out from Medicine Master Pocket's loose robe. The huge white snake opened its mouth and directly caught Yamato who was flying towards him in its mouth. The white snake didn't reveal its poisonous fangs, so Yamato didn't receive any injury. At this moment, Medicine Master Bag forcibly hid the indignation in his heart. After all, for the sensitive Medicine Master Bag, Black Zetsu's action was simply telling him that he was powerless against this wooden egg. Although this was a fact, but Medicine Master Bag still didn't want to be humiliated like this. I don't need you to say more. Looking at Black Zetsu, Medicine Master Bag coldly said. Obviously it was such a short conversation, but it was really full of gunpowder smell. And as the nominal leader of Akatsuki organization, Uchiha Obito coldly looked at Medicine Master Bag and Black Zetsu who were at daggers drawn, and the atmosphere was tense. Persuade? Uchiha Obito didn't think about such a thing at all. What Uchiha Obito wanted was not how harmonious the organization was. What Obito wanted was to have enough power to compete with the joint forces of the 5 great shinobi villages. Now he, Black Zetsu, and Medicine Master Bag have a common enemy. And his biggest goal now is to defeat the 5 great shinobi villages as a common enemy. Once the 5 great shinobi villages are defeated, the Eye of the Moon plan will be implemented. At that time, everything will be under Uchiha Obito's control. Dealing with this small disharmony is simply a simple matter. Chapter 557. With the fermentation of time and the news of the war spread like wildfire, the entire ninja world seemed to be shrouded in a layer of haze. The ninja world has experienced too much pain because of the war. When the news of the war began to spread, almost everyone living in the ninja world began to become nervous. Everyone in the ninja world was like a frightened animal, doing everything possible to prevent themselves from being hurt by the upcoming war. But for those who are at the top of the power, who can benefit from the war is the grandest carnival. In the daimyo house of the Land of Fire, the daimyo of the Land of Fire didn't seem to be worried at the moment. Instead, his eyes were very excited. The Land of Fire is the strongest village in the ninja world, Woodleaf Ninja Village. In the First Shinobi World War, Second Shinobi World War, and the Third Shinobi World War not long ago, although Woodleaf itself also suffered a certain degree of loss, but there is no doubt that every time they stood in the middle of the battlefield as the winner. It is precisely because of the victory of Woodleaf again and again that the daimyo of the Land of Fire have a kind of almost blind faith in Woodleaf. Looking at some of the predictions about the war and the temporary plan of Woodleaf submitted by the 4th Hokage Wave Kaze Watergate, the daimyo of the Land of Fire showed a bit of a greedy smile at the moment. The 5 great ninja villages are attacking the Akatsuki of the Land of Rain. What a grand event this is. Slowly picking up a wide-mouthed wine cup beside him, the daimyo of the Land of Fire showed a touch of fanaticism in his eyes. Expand the territory, expand the territory. As the supreme leader of a country, in addition to letting the country pass on smoothly in his own hands, what else is worth being so excited about? Naturally, it is to make the country stronger in his own hands. The strength of a country is reflected in many aspects, but the most obvious and the most significant is the expansion of the territory. The daimyo of the Land of Fire has begun to slowly realize the aging of his body, and the time he can stay in this world to enjoy the glory and wealth is not much. But when he looked back at the past few decades, even though he had achieved quite a lot of political achievements, he still felt that it wasn't enough for the Fire Nation. And now, an opportunity that was hard to come by was placed right in front of the Fire Country's eyes. This time, the Rain Country could be said to have angered everyone. In the eyes of the daimyo of the Land of Fire, there is no possibility of failure in this war. When the 5 great shinobi villages won the war, the daimyo of the Land of Fire decided to gather the daimyo of several other countries and directly use their power to erase the Land of Rain from the map of the shinobi world. At that time, the 5 major countries would jointly divide the country of Rain, although the territory of the country of Rain wasn't that big. However, if the Fire Nation could get a share of this land, it would be considered as an unparalleled achievement in expanding their territory. Just as the great name of the Fire Nation was immersed in leaving his name in the annals of history for future generations to look up to, a burst of noise suddenly sounded from outside the palace where the great name of the Fire Nation was. Assassin! Assassin! Guards, an assassin has broken into the palace. Catch him, don't let him get away. Kill! 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 The harsh shouting directly broke the silence of the night, and also broke the delusion of the daimyo of the Land of Fire about the victory of the war. People are always afraid of death, and for the daimyo of the Land of Fire who is in a high position and lives in luxury, his life is naturally more precious. After hearing the harsh shouting outside, a chill spread from the heart directly swept the whole body of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. In the previous wars, no matter how anxious the war situation was, each shinobi village maintained a certain restraint between each other, that is, they tried to put the battlefield in an area that is difficult for civilians to get close to, and didn't attack the political system of the country. So subconsciously, the daimyo of the Land of Fire didn't think that he would be attacked, he just thought that the worst situation is that Woodleaf will lose and pay a certain amount of compensation. But now, as the enemy of the Land of Fire, Amigakure has obviously given up such a bottom line, and began to directly and blatantly attack the political leader of the Land of Fire, the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Fear swept the heart of the daimyo of the Land of Fire in an instant. The daimyo now wants to open the door of his room and let all his guards come to his side to protect his safety, but the reason in the daimyo's heart is constantly reminding him that he must not expose his position at will. The daimyo of the Land of Fire has experienced a lot of things, but most of his experiences are political games. This kind of killing without spilling blood is the most familiar thing to the daimyo of the Land of Fire. But now, the way the daimyo of the Land of Fire is completely unacceptable to the daimyo of the Land of Fire. A thin layer of sweat has been attached to the daimyo's forehead because of fear and tension. In order to prevent himself from screaming, the daimyo of the Land of Fire even covered his mouth with his hand. The originally elegant and lazy sitting posture had disappeared without a trace. At this moment, the daimyo of the Fire Nation directly fell to the ground. His body was slightly curled up. Obviously, he wanted to use this method to give himself some sense of security. Chapter 558. This humble servant greets your majesty. This humble servant greets your majesty. A group of guards and servants kowtowing in front of the daimyo of the Land of Fire shouted together to the daimyo of the Land of Fire, but after hearing such a shout, the daimyo of the Land of Fire looked very indifferent, as if the person who was scared out of his wits before wasn't him. In an understatement, the daimyo of the Land of Fire said to the guards and servants who were kowtowing in front of him, "Get up." Hearing the words of the daimyo, the two guards who had been kowtowing in front of the daimyo with slightly damaged armor stood up from their kowtowing posture. As for the other servants with lower statuses, they maintained their kneeling posture and retreated to both sides of the room. Reporting to your majesty, just now this humble servant discovered an unknown ninja who forced his way into your majesty's bedroom. After the verbal warning didn't work, this humble servant immediately led the guards of the Land of Fire to stop this ninja. After a battle, this assassin was finally killed. I hope your majesty won't be frightened by this humble servant's failure of duty. These two people wearing armor are not ordinary soldiers, they have the ability to fight ninjas, but they are not strong people who came out of the ninja village. The daimyo of the Land of Fire is reluctant to regard them as lowly servants. Even if these two guards seem to be asking for punishment, the daimyo will never blame them. Instead, he will go up and constantly appease them. Sure enough, the daimyo of the Land of Fire slowly stood up from where he was originally sitting. He walked to the front of the two guards and said to them with a kind smile, "Sir, I'm here to help you. The two of you don't have to be like this, encountering such a thing is unexpected. Fortunately, with the joint efforts of the two of you, in the future, the enemy will be killed. This is already a very good record. How can I pick bones in an egg and criticize the two of you?" The words of the daimyo of the Land of Fire fell into the ears of the two guards. Naturally, they were very happy. Looking at the expression on the faces of the two guards, the daimyo knew that he has successfully won a wave of people's hearts. He reached into his bosom and took out a high-grade silk handkerchief. Then, he slowly pressed the handkerchief in his hand onto the blood-stained armor. It seemed like he was wiping the armor for the two guards. As people with a certain level of skill, the two guards naturally noticed the movement of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Before the daimyo of the Land of Fire really wiped his armor, the two guards immediately knelt on the ground and said to the daimyo of the Land of Fire, "Your Majesty, the two of us was lucky enough to be favored by your Majesty, and we were able to work in your Majesty's palace. With a high salary, we can enjoy a luxurious life. This kind of life is the daimyo of the Land of the Land of the Land of the Land of Fire. To be able to receive such treatment from your Majesty, we are already in fear and trepidation. How can we let your Majesty personally wipe our armor for us, and let your precious body be tainted?" After listening to the words of the two guards, the daimyo still squatted down by himself. He took the white, exquisitely embroidered handkerchief in his hand and began to wipe the two guards who were half kneeling in front of him. After wiping a few times, the originally white handkerchief was already stained with blood. When they saw the highest leader of the Land of the Fire personally wipe their armor, the feelings of gratitude directly filled the hearts of the two guards. There was a faint feeling of tears in their eyes. Feeling that he had done enough, the daimyo pinched his handkerchief in his hand and slowly stood up from his squatting position. He then said to the two guards half kneeling in front of him, "Don't worry, I'm sorry. This daimyo is just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken. Because of the promising ancestors, I have the opportunity to inherit the position of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Since the succession, this daimyo has been questioning myself. How can I become the daimyo of such a great country? In terms of thesis, there are countless civil officials in the Land of Fire who are better than me. In terms of martial arts, I can't even wield a long sword a few times. How can such a person be a qualified daimyo? After thinking carefully, I finally came to a conclusion. The daimyo of the Land of Fire slowly paced in front of the two half-kneeling guards in front of him. His face was full of worry for the people of the Land of Fire. Although I am not proficient in literature and martial arts, but after careful consideration, I found that I can still do something. I am not proficient in literature, but I can let every scholar in the Land of Fire be able to use their pen and ink to their heart's content. I am not proficient in martial arts, but I can let all the martial artists in the Land of Fire be able to get the respect they deserve. With that, the daimyo looked at the two guards half kneeling in front of him. Both of you are the best among the many martial artists in the Land of Fire. Even without the same environment as the ninja village, you can still cultivate to such a level. It can't be said that you are talented. More importantly, you're still willing to serve under me. You fought to guard me, you were injured to protect me. How can I stand by and watch you coldly because of such a dirty thing? The daimyo's words were full of emotion, and even his eyes were filled with tears. The daimyo of the Land of Fire has become like this, not to mention the two low-born martial artists who are half kneeling in front of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. At this moment, the two guards kneeling in front of the daimyo have tears in their eyes. They have all knelt in front of the daimyo of the Land of Fire and shouted loudly, "We are willing to go through water and tread on fire for your majesty." Hearing the voices of the two guards, the daimyo immediately helped the two guards who were half kneeling on the ground up with a face full of excitement. After encouraging the two guards with a few more words and promising some rewards, the two guards walked out of the room with faces full of gratitude. Seeing the two guards have walked away, the daimyo raised his hand and looked at the white handkerchief in his hand that has been stained with blood. His brows slightly wrinkled, as if throwing away a very disgusting garbage, he threw the handkerchief in his hand to the side. Glancing at the person kneeling on the ground who was obviously the leader of the slaves, the daimyo coldly asked, "Have you found out the identity of that assassin?" The slave who was kneeling on the side slowly stood up, then whispered a few words in the ear of the daimyo. In the eyes of the daimyo of the Land of Fire, a trace of anger emerged in the blink of an eye. Akatsuki Organization. Chapter 559. In the tense period of preparation for the war, an uninvited guest came to Woodleaf Village. The status of this uninvited guest seems to be very high. Even the leader of Woodleaf Village, Yondaime Watergate, the fourth Hokage, personally came to greet him with a hat that represents his identity as the Hokage. Looking at the palanquin, which was deliberately reduced in decorations, but still looked expensive, carried slowly by 16 strong men, Watergate's expression hidden under the hat became very serious. Today, in order to meet such a character, Watergate brought almost all the high-end combat forces that can be transferred here. Watergate is very clear, anyone can face the risk, but only this person must not have the slightest accident. Finally, under the support of 16 strong men, the luxurious palanquin came to Watergate. As the leader of Woodleaf Village, Watergate went directly to the palanquin, and personally opened the curtain in front of the palanquin for the person sitting in it. The curtain in front of the palanquin was slowly opened, and the person sitting in it also revealed his face. Slightly unhealthy white skin, slightly old appearance, this person is the real ruler of the Land of Fire, daimyo of the Land of Fire. Although nominally, the status of the Land of Fire and the Hokage of Woodleaf Village is the same, after all, Woodleaf Village is rooted in the Land of Fire, and in theory, it is under the rule of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Before, Woodleaf Village suffered great damage because of the invasion of the 6 Paths of Pain, and it was also with the help of the daimyo of the Land of Fire that they were able to recover from the damage so quickly. So at this moment, although Watergate's behavior of personally opening the curtain for the daimyo of the Land of Fire seems a bit undignified, but it is not incomprehensible. If it was normal times, seeing Watergate so humble, the daimyo of the Land of Fire will certainly not let go of such an opportunity to show his charm as a leader. But at this moment, the expression of the daimyo of the Land of Fire is very unnatural. Watergate is very keen to capture a trace of unconcealable fear from the eyes of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Was the information that he had received all this time true? That's right, as the military force of the Fire Nation, Watergate naturally heard about the invasion of foreign enemies. However, due to the Fire Nation's identity, Woodleaf Village couldn't put such a high-ranking person on their monitoring list. Therefore, the information obtained by Watergate was actually incomplete. He only knew that Akatsuki seemed to have broken their long-standing practice, and began to attack some people in the political system without military force. 4th Hokage, Daimyo came out from his palanquin, and deeply looked at Bofeng Watergate. And when he determined that the person standing in front of him was the one who had created countless brilliant achievements, and had personally defeated the former leader of Akatsuki organization, 6 Paths Pain, his expression finally relaxed a little. Your Majesty, Watergate took a few steps back, bowed respectfully to the daimyo of the Country of Fire, then stepped forward and said, I have also heard about the things that happened in the past few days. Now, all the people present are the elites of our Woodleaf Village, so daimyo doesn't have to worry about your own safety. Please come with me, and after we reach a safe place, we will discuss how to solve the recent problems. Daimyo of the Fire Nation heard Watergate's words, and looked around at the ninjas standing around him. Most of these ninjas are people who have made a name for themselves in the ninja world, and Daimyo of the Fire Nation also knows many familiar faces, and even people who have names and nicknames. Although Daimyo of the Fire Nation has always had a certain amount of trust in his guards, but during this period of time, he has been attacked more than once. Although such attacks were resisted by his guards again and again, but at the same time, it also made Daimyo of the Fire Nation a little uneasy about the ability of his guards. Now that he can see so many strong people of the shinobi world standing beside him, the daimyo of the Land of Fire also slowly relaxed from his originally hanging posture. 4th Hokage, please lead the way. I'm really tired these days. Even if daimyo didn't say it, Watergate can very keenly judge from his face and expression. At this moment, daimyo obviously hasn't slept well for a long time. Watergate can roughly judge the level of daimyo of the Fire Nation's guards. If an ordinary jonin encounters such a team of guards, Minato can guarantee that he will lose without a doubt. After all, this is a team that the daimyo of the Land of Fire used their huge wealth to create. Their armor and weapons were even custom-made at a high price from the Land of Iron, the only remaining samurai in the shinobi world. But after going through the attacks of Akatsuki organization, more than half of the members of this group of guards were actually reduced. It seems that Akatsuki organization really didn't just launch a tentative attack on daimyo of the Fire Nation, but they really want to put daimyo of the Fire Nation to death. But Watergate knows that such a place is not suitable to talk about such things. So, forcibly suppressing the confusion in his heart, Watergate very respectfully led daimyo of the Fire Nation to the place he had prepared to rest. Not long after, Watergate took daimyo of the Fire Nation to a place that looks very luxuriously decorated. Here was originally the property of a very famous businessman in the Woodleaf Village, but not long ago, after an investigation by Umbu, they suddenly found that this businessman seems to have an unclear relationship with Akatsuki organization, so this businessman was directly taken away by Umbu, and this magnificent property was directly left behind. But at this moment, Daimyo of the Fire Nation didn't have the time to check how exquisite the garden in this property is, and how colorful the dugong is. After Daimyo of the Fire Nation arrived inside the house, he immediately fell on the sofa, and the fatigue of his whole body seemed to have reached the peak at this moment. Looking at the sleepy face of Daimyo of the Fire Nation, Watergate tentatively said to Daimyo of the Fire Nation, "Your Majesty is tired from the long journey, you might as well take a rest first. Anyway, you can fully trust that we can guarantee your safety here, at least 3 jonin will be around your room to protect you, and we will also arrange a certain number of umbu to investigate your surrounding environment at all times." Hearing Watergate's words, Daimyo of the Fire Nation finally nodded tiredly after thinking for a while, and with the help of his servant, he walked towards the bedroom of this house. Chapter 560. When the daimyo of the Land of Fire fell on the bed, he fell into a deep sleep almost instantly. After seeing that the daimyo had fallen asleep, the servants also retreated from the room one by one and stood outside the door, slowly waiting for their master to call them. At the moment, Watergate was already standing with the guard leader of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Watergate made a gesture to invite the guard leader to sit beside him. Originally, the guard leader's heart was still a little nervous. After all, in terms of status, Watergate, the 4th Hokage, is at the same level as the daimyo. For most people, Minato was a living legend, and such a legend suddenly invited him, who was only a little famous, to sit with him. The guard leader was so excited that words couldn't describe his feelings at this moment. But in the face of Minato's amiable smile, the nervousness in the guard leader's heart slowly subsided. The guard leader plucked up his courage and sat opposite to Watergate, then said to Watergate cautiously, "Hokage-sama. Do you have any orders?" Hearing the rather nervous words of the guard leader, Minato smiled amiably at the guard leader and said, "That's right. It's nothing, you don't have to be nervous. To put it bluntly, you and I are actually both warriors, it's just that the direction of our development is not the same. But as a warrior, that kind of straightforward heart is the same. The reason why I called you over is not to question or criticize you, but simply to ask your daimyo what he experienced. What did you guys go through?" Watergate's words were very sincere, he didn't mean to put on airs at all. The guard leader sitting opposite to Watergate was very comfortable listening to him. Under the deliberate guidance of Watergate, his thoughts gradually immersed in the almost endless attacks he experienced in the past period of time. The guard leader slowly spoke to Watergate about the battles he experienced as the leader of the daimyo's guards, but the more he listened, the more Watergate felt the matter was strange. As a ninja, Watergate was very clear that if a ninja really wants to kill or capture his mission target, he will stop at nothing. Hiding his true identity, sneaking in, drugging, assassination are all common things for a ninja. But listening to the description of the guard leader, it seems that all the members of Akatsuki organization who have been attacking the daimyo of the Land of Fire during this period of time, almost all of them directly fought with the guards. And it seems after the battle, the attackers from Akatsuki organization even directly wore the Akatsuki organization's trademark black uniform with red clouds. They didn't pursue killing a few people, only pursuing how bloody and terrible the scene was. Such a method of action was truly strange to the extreme. And the strangest thing is, except for the first time we defeated the enemy and left the enemy's head, every time after we killed the enemy's body was very strange and directly integrated into the soil and disappeared. Originally, Watergate was just quietly listening to the guard leader retelling the events that happened during this period of time, but suddenly Watergate heard such a sentence. Watergate immediately ended his long silence and said to the guard leader, "Wait. You mean you left the enemy's head? Can you let me take a look?" Hearing Watergate's words, although the guard leader was a little confused, he nodded and said to Watergate, "Of course, I will bring you the enemy's head that we have kept. To be honest, this person's appearance is really strange, although I have seen a lot of strange things, but the appearance of this enemy is really strange." After that, the guard leader walked towards the place where the guards were stationed outside. After a while, the guard leader came in with a box. Putting the enemy's head in the box in front of Watergate, the guard leader opened the box for Watergate. Watergate looked at the wooden box, and the enemy's face appeared in front of Watergate. Watergate had a very systematic understanding of the composition of the members of Akatsuki organization, so he naturally knew this person with a strange face, because this person's appearance was exactly the same as the half-black half-white Zetsu in the information. The only difference was that this Zetsu's whole face was white, without any black part. Zetsu? Hearing Watergate suddenly call out such a name, the guard leader was a little surprised. Hokage-sama, do you know this person? Watergate nodded, then said to the guard leader, indeed, this person was actually mentioned in the information collected by Woodleaf. However, it doesn't match the physical characteristics in our data. I'm not sure what's going on now. I don't know if I can take this head temporarily and give it to the people of our ninja village to study. Hearing Watergate's inquiry, in fact, the guard leader wanted to directly agree. But after all, such a thing involves the daimyo of the Land of Fire, so the guard leader couldn't immediately respond to Watergate's inquiry at the moment. Obviously, Watergate also saw the entanglement in the guard leader's heart at the moment, and quickly reacted and said to the guard leader, of course, this is not a matter of a short time, it's not too late to talk about these things after His Majesty has rested. Hearing Watergate's words, the guard leader's face, which was originally very entangled, became slightly better. I still have a lot of things to deal with, please protect His Majesty. After His Majesty has rested, inform me to come and discuss with His Majesty. Watergate looked at the guard leader and said to him, and the guard leader also understood and respectfully saluted Watergate. That's natural, please rest assured Hokage-sama. Looking at the guard leader, Watergate smiled and directly walked out of this exquisite courtyard specially prepared for the daimyo of the Land of Fire. Watergate didn't rush to his office, instead, he slowly walked on the street of Woodleaf and began to think about the Akatsuki's current behavior. In fact, not only the Land of Fire's daimyo, several other villages also sent their country's daimyo to Woodleaf, and the Akatsuki was very deliberately, almost provocatively attacked them. What's the benefit of such behavior? Watergate couldn't understand it for a while, because this will only make the countries more united against a common enemy, and the Akatsuki didn't seem to have the slightest benefit. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.